All right, good morning, everyone. If we can circle the wagons and kick this off, the mayor's almost here, so I think the timing's going to be just perfect. My name is Jane Leach, and I am honored to be one of the leaders of the Hilltop Early Childhood Summit, Partnership Summit. It's a very long name. It's hard to get it right. But I want to thank you for coming and spending your Saturday with us. And I offer special thanks to the planning team that is surrounding you, to our community guests, they're going to come and go throughout the day, to the J. Ashburn for their hospitality this day, and to our mayor, because truthfully, without Mayor Ginther's initiative, we would not be here together, and we would not be exploring the topic of early learning and the power of that for our community. And I would love to give a special thanks to our two co-facilitators, John Tesloff, whom you met earlier from the Columbus Metropolitan Library, the Hilltop branch, and to Mike Curtin, who represented this community so well in the House of Representatives. So for their leadership and involvement, we're most grateful. I would like to introduce to you now a fellow leader in this endeavor. She's a team member, a leader, and she is the education director for the City of Columbus. Please join me in welcoming Rhonda Johnson.
Good morning, everybody. We used a scientific method to pick the day that we thought everyone could attend. We asked ourselves one question: when's Ohio State playing? And so that's how we ended up doing this today, because the game is not until 7:30 tonight. So my job is to introduce the mayor. I'm hoping that I can sing and dance like just long enough that when I finish, he will be walking in the door. So I'm just going to begin to say that our mayor was elected the 53rd mayor of the City of Columbus on November 3rd of 2015. And he previously served on Columbus City Council from 2007 to 2015 and served as president of council from 2011 until he assumed office of mayor on January 1st of 2016. Mayor Ginther is a Columbus native and proud Columbus City Schools graduate. You know that means a lot to you if you live in Columbus. If you live in Columbus, you say, well, what high school did you go to, right? So we're very proud that he graduated. And he has a history of community service. Years ago, he was a member of the Columbus Board of Education. And I sat across the table from Mayor Ginther as the union president and vice president at the time. So I'm very happy now that I am sitting on the same side of the table as Mayor Ginther, working with him to help our youngest residents. Under Mayor Ginther's leadership, the City of Columbus was named America's Opportunity City, and as mayor, he continues to work with the community, business, faith, and labor leaders to promote opportunities for every person in every neighborhood. And that's why we're here today. Mayor Ginther is charting the future of early childhood education in Columbus. He is working with Columbus City Schools, community-based providers, and private sector leaders to increase access to high-quality pre-kindergarten and ultimately to provide universal pre-K for all Columbus children. During the first year of his administration, the Linden Park Early Childhood Center, you'll hear about that more today, a first-of-its-kind center that combines early childhood education with parent engagement and professional development, opened in one of the city's most vulnerable neighborhoods. Today, he is going to give you the charge for his vision for early learning in this neighborhood. Mayor Ginther, the floor is all yours.
Good morning. It's great to see you all, and thrilled to be here on the Hilltop with some of our great friends and partners in this part of town, and excited about the great partnership that's taking shape because of the great leaders in the room that have all stepped up. It's pretty simple. We all know, all the research and studies show us that young people that have high-quality early learning opportunities stay on track and are going to be more successful in life in their careers. We know that they will have more opportunities throughout their K through 12, but also beyond, whether they go directly into the workforce or continue education, apprenticeship programs, and different opportunities. So early learning, particularly birth to 5, and there's a reason that early learning is such a focus for me. Many of you are also aware of our Celebrate One initiative of going after our crisis level infant mortality rates in this community. It's really a vision for making Columbus a national leader in birth to 5, really focusing on how do we make sure we have better birth outcomes with our youngest citizens and expose them to great, high-quality early learning opportunities so they start kindergarten with the kindergarten readiness skills they need. We know there's a direct connection between that and students that are passing the 3rd grade reading guarantee on to other tests and exams, high school graduation, and the matriculation on to other opportunities, whether continuing higher ed, professional development, apprenticeship, all of the great things that give our kids, whether here on the Hilltop or in other places in this community, a chance to succeed and provide for their families. We have a challenge here on the Hilltop, particularly in the space of early learning. And one of the reasons I mentioned and talked so much about the Hilltop Early Childhood Partnership in my State of the City speech earlier this year is we have fewer preschoolers enrolled on the Hilltop than I believe, Director, any other neighborhood in the city. That's unacceptable. I know it's unacceptable to you and to all of our great partners here on the Hilltop, particularly if we want to build this national model, birth to 5. And so we're blessed with great partners like Jane Leach from Hilltop Preschool, Jay McAllister here, who's from the chair of the Hilltop Area Commission. I also just wanted to say very quickly thank you to Gary Attaway and the Boys and Girls Club of Central Ohio for hosting us here today. Everyone that's making this early childhood partnership, we're taking it from vision to reality. And so having your expertise, your engagement, your connection and credibility in the community is going to be absolutely essential for us to reach our goal. And our goal, I make the director nervous every time I say this, is to double the number of young people enrolled in high-quality preschool opportunities on the Hilltop by 2020. That is absolutely essential for us to see the progress and growth for young people on the Hilltop in the years ahead. I know we can get it done because we have great partners like you in the room, and I'm grateful to have everyone stepping up in different roles to help us move this forward. I know that I also want to mention Mike Curtin and John Tetzloff for co-facilitating this event here today. I know based on my conversations with them how important early childhood education is to them and how much the Hilltop is near and dear to their hearts, and so grateful to have their help supporting this. I know that there are lots of other things you could be doing on a Saturday morning. And for you to be here and to show your commitment and engage in this process and help open up ladders of opportunity for our youngest citizens here on the Hilltop, we're going to build a model here. We're going to build a model here that we can take to other neighborhoods throughout our great city and also be a model for other cities around the country to see what great neighborhood movements can do in the space of early learning. When parents, educators, partners, business leaders, neighborhood and community leaders all come together to say our top priority is our young people. And we know that our youngest learners have great, great potential when we all come together to focus on them, lift them up, and invest in them. And that, my friends, couldn't be better represented with the great Hilltop USA group that we have here today. So grateful for everybody being here today. Look forward to working with you. And believe it or not, 2020 is right around the corner. So every day, we will be focused on this and moving this ball forward because our youngest citizens are counting on all of us. Thank you all for being here today.
Following Mayor Ginther, it's not like there's any pressure on me, is there? My name is Jay McAllister. I'm the chairman of the Greater Hilltop Area Commission. We have committees that, about anything that City Council has a committee for, we have the same committee that relates to it. We would love to have everybody come out to our commission meetings, get involved in the committees, get involved in your community. I have business cards with me, so if you want any information, you just see me sometime today and I'll do my best to help you. The Hilltop. Let's start at the beginning. Lucas Sullivan is actually responsible for the Hilltop. If you've heard of Sullivan Avenue, that's who it's named after, Lucas Sullivan. Everything pretty much west of downtown used to be farmland. And when it was originally deeded for the very first time, it was deeded to Lucas Sullivan. Now, how does that get to be the Hilltop? Way back when it didn't have a name, it was called Sullivan's Hill. And when it was then finally incorporated into the city, Sullivan's Hill became the Hilltop. So, the unofficial start, there was never really a Founder's Day kind of thing. The unofficial start was in 1833, when West Broad Street was opened for the very first time. It wasn't even called West Broad Street back then, it was the National Road. And you can still find the markers for the National Road if you know where to look. They're still all along Broad Street. I think there's one at the Camp Chase Railroad overpass somewhere in that area, maybe some other, but they're all along Broad Street. I mean, not just in the Hilltop, but all along National Road, as far as you want to go. One of the most important establishments that we had in the Hilltop was the Camp Chase. It was actually a Union military base, I guess. It was the staging and training area for a lot of the Union soldiers. It also had a prison camp that was a part of it. At the height, when they had the most there, it housed over 9,000 prisoners. There's still the Camp Chase Cemetery. Now the Camp Chase, what would you call it, the base, it covered about half the Hilltop at the time. And there's still Camp Chase Cemetery there, which houses about 2,000 or slightly more than 2,000 graves. Interesting side note, I am buried there. That is to say, there is a tombstone in there with my name on it. My legal name is Michael J. McAllister, and there is a tombstone in there with Michael J. McAllister on it. If you want to see my tombstone, it's this. It is the second in the second row to the farthest west. Now, lining up with that, just in the very last row to the west, in the same spot is the grave of the unknown. There is no name on it; it just says unknown. It is rumored to be haunted by the lady in gray. People say that you can go in there at certain times when the moon's just right or whatever, and you can see her. There are flowers that appear, or a flower that appears on this grave from time to time. Nobody knows where they come from. It's rumored that she's the one that left them there. To the west, our gateway to the east, coming in from downtown, was once home to let me get this straight, Columbus State Hospital for the Insane. That kind of says a lot for the Hilltop, that when you were coming to the Hilltop, you were coming to the insane asylum. So, in fact, there is still a cemetery there. If you know where the Columbus Police Heliport is, if you just go to the opposite side of that little lane, what was it called again? Columbus State Hospital for the Insane. The cemetery is right there, and it's kind of spooky, because when you go in there aren't any names. The grave markers say specimen. They'll say specimen 104 or specimen 197, whatever it might be. This was built in 1870. I don't want to know what they were doing in 1870 that people got buried with the name specimen. That's kind of spooky. We have two signs that say, "Welcome to the Hilltop." They're kind of historical. One's just kind of across the street here at Rhodes Park, and I'm the one that takes care of that. I've kind of rebuilt it and repainted it and refurbished it all a couple of years back. The other one is at Wilson Road, at the Camp Chase Railroad overpass, kind of Wilson and Broad. And an interesting fact about that is that it is in the wrong place. It's in the wrong place by a good 2 miles. It really should be out by the casino. There's a big sign out there at Georgesville and the casino that says, "Welcome to the city." That's where the "Welcome to the Hilltop" sign should be, is right beside it, because the Hilltop goes clear out to 270 there. Population. Depending on who you talk to, we have anywhere from like 62,000, and I've heard up to 60 or 78,000. The latest census that I could find puts the population at 67,000. Now, there are people, and it's a very small group, that would say, "We want the Hilltop divided because it is too big." If you go by population or whether you go by acreage, we're still only the 4th or 5th largest area in the city. So, Mayor, if they come to you saying, "We want to divide the Hilltop," say, "There are bigger areas, leave the Hilltop alone." The boundaries for the Hilltop let's start down here at Broad Street on the east side. Starts at I-70. There's part of I-70 that goes north and south there for just a little bit. Follows I-70 around to all the way out to like Fisher Road at 270. And then the west border is 270 all the way around out by Georgesville Road, where 270 turns and goes north and south again. East and west again. And then it follows that 270 to the CSX railroad line. And the CSX railroad line then follows back over on the eastern border to where it meets I-70 again. Now, unless you're a railroad buff like me, you might not know where the CSX railroad line is. Think 3C Highway. It parallels 3C Highway. The houses that are on 3C Highway, their backyards back up to the CSX railroad line. But they are not in the Hilltop. We have to get on the other side of those railroad tracks to be in the Hilltop. We cover all of or part of the zip codes 43204, 43222, 43223, 43123, and 43228. There are approximately 10 different smaller neighborhoods that are actually part of the Hilltop. I'm not going to try to name them all because I would end up forgetting. I'll name some of the more prominent ones. Westgate is, if you talk to some of the residents in Westgate and you say, "Do you live in the Hilltop?" They'll say, "No, I live in Westgate." Well, I've got news for you. Westgate is right smack in the middle of the Hilltop. The Highland West area, which is east of Hague, the west is something that the neighborhood association came up with. It was actually, and it's on the deeds, it is the Highland area. And that goes back to, and that's not politically correct anymore, but back to when there was the Bottoms, and then we had the Highland. You come up the hill to the Highland, and that's where that came from. We also have the Great Western area, which is where I'm from. I'm the founder of the Great Western Civic Association. That's west of Hague, all the way to where Great Western Shopping Center, which back in its heyday, that was the shopping center to go to on this side of town. It was a big place and very, very nice. It's kind of declined since then, but one of the other big areas, and I'm sure this area will come up today. I'm not going to mention everything, but this area, it's going to come up. And that is the Holly Hill and Georgian Heights area. Now, the reason I say that's going to come up is that right on the edge of that are the Wedgwood apartments, and Wedgwood needs help. There are like 400 apartments in there. Zorka, you might know better than I do how many people, but 650 apartments? Okay. But yeah, it needs help, so it will probably come up in discussions. Let's see. Over 80% of the Hilltop is single-family homes. It's you think of apartments, and that 80% is single-family homes. Some of the big businesses that were one of the biggest businesses we had over the years, and I better read this, General Motors, Fisher Body, and Delphi divisions. That was on Georgesville Road, and at one time, that place was huge. I actually toured that when I was in high school. You could not, when you're inside, you could not see from one end to the other. It was so big. You could go probably on any street in the Hilltop, any block, and you'd find 2 or 3 families where the main income was coming from that plant. It was, so when that plant closed, I believe, in my opinion, that is when the Hilltop began to decline, because, at least 3 families on every street was now out of work. So I think that's when it really began to come downhill. The people of the Hilltop, all the rest of this was kind of trivia and statistics. The people are what the Hilltop is all about. We are proud people. We're the good working class people. We're the ones that get up in the mornings and go to work. We're your carpenters, that's me. Your plumbers, your electricians, your auto mechanics, we're the people that get up and go to work so that we can raise our families, have our homes, and most of us, or a lot of us, were born here. We have kids that grow up to live here. Some are 3rd and 4th generations, grandkids. That's what the Hilltop is about, the people. One last little thing in closing. There's an interesting piece of trivia. The Hilltop is so well known across the United States that you can go anywhere in this country and mail a letter with nothing more than a name and the address of Hilltop, USA, and it will find its way to the rightful recipient. The Hilltop is coming back. Like I said, we are a proud people. It is going to be better than it ever was. We are going to bring it back, and it's going to be great again. We're working hard at it. So, thank you very much.
Good morning. My name's Laura Schnabelin. I'm principal at John Burroughs Elementary here in the Hilltop, but I'm actually here to introduce to you a different Laura. Laura Justice is a distinguished professor of educational psychology at The Ohio State University. She's also executive director of the Crane Center for Early Childhood Research and Policy, located in the Wineland Park neighborhood. Justice is the editor-in-chief of the leading journal in the field of early childhood education, titled and recently received the OSU Distinguished Scholar Award. Justice's current research is focused on identifying ways to improve outcomes for children participating in early education settings through curricular innovations, professional development of teachers, and improvement of policies affecting classroom composition. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Laura Justice.
All I want to do is run over to that casino and get one of these dinners. You'll see me there tonight. Oop. Oh, I know. I think they were DSW, maybe? How's this for the mic? And can I take it off? I wanted to, first of all, just acknowledge how incredibly important it is when you're talking about early childhood expansion to have a mayor behind your effort. It makes all the difference, and I work with a lot of cities and states who are undergoing early childhood expansion, and if you don't have a mayor behind it, it's not going to work out very well in your favor. So we have to acknowledge how crucial it is that our city is behind this and making these things happen. The other thing I wanted to acknowledge is how impressive it is that you're taking this on in a place-based way, that you have all the key people in Hilltop here working on this effort and generating solutions that will fit with this community. That's also fairly unusual. So I am so honored to be here and talking with you today and watch the metamorphosis of this effort take place. I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes, which I should watch my clock, about the power of early education. I'm a little bit off my game because I don't have control of my slides, so we're going to sync up. So, okay, I divided this talk into 3 parts, and the first part is thinking about what's happening as the child develops from birth to age 5, which typically accompanies entry to kindergarten. Sierra? And what we're going to do is we're going to build a brain. Okay? It's really important to understand that when a baby is born, their brain is in an unfinished state. One of the things that's very unique about humans, I don't think you have these slides. People are, well, you're either shuffling looking for these or you're bored and reading other things already, which is bad. I'm happy to send these to you. So the baby is born, and what's really unique about human babies is our head is disproportionately large. These are really big heads, right? So babies have big heads for a reason. And turn to the next slide. Is it broken? What's happened, the baby's brain contains 100 billion neurons. So this is a bunch of neurons, and so you have these neurons, and the pathways that run between neurons are called dendrites and axons run between neurons, and they create pathways where information is conveyed. So what's going to happen is the baby is born, there's 100 billion neurons in their head. Anybody know what just happened? We're trying to fix it. Okay. So there's 100 billion neurons in the head, and what has to happen over the first several years of life is that all of these neurons need to build connections with one another. Sierra? So what this looks like neurobiologically is you have a neuron, and they need to make friends. How do these friendships happen? It happens through experience. So every time an adult gets in a kid's face, about 25% for infants, about 25% of their daily life, there's a face in their face. That declines over time, but babies are born and adults are in their face, and we're talking to them and we're saying strange things, and those cause these connections to take place. So think of it this way. Baby's born, billions of neurons, but they're all these individual entities. Experience happens, and it shapes those connections. If there is no experience, what happens? There's no connections. We have to understand, foremost, when you come together and you make these crucial decisions about the lives of young children in the Hilltop community, you are engaged in policies and practices concerning how we want to build the brains of babies in Hilltop. Okay? You are in the child's brain and trying to create experiences that provide these rich opportunities to children. What's really amazing about young kids is our brain is hardwired to do this task. It's hardwired to develop language, but you have to have input to zap those connections, okay? So you're born, the language centers are in the left side of your head, in the temporal lobe, and some functions up here in the frontal lobe. So this whole, if you can put your hand on the side of your head right behind your ear, this is where your language centers reside, okay? Not over here for most people, so it's right here. And so the child has all these billions of neurons, and they have to have experience, which is going to create all those connections. So the baby's brain is hardwired. It is ready. We are designed to develop language. We are designed to develop higher order thinking. But we are relying on the environment to give us what we need for this to happen. This is a really important slide. So I want to walk you through some of the details here. I mentioned that the baby has billions of neurons in the head, and they need to make friends with other neurons. That's called synaptogenesis. It's a very fancy word for saying this neuron makes a friend with this neuron. Those are the pathways through which we become humans and understand and convey information. This is the peak of that friendship making, or synaptogenesis. If we start prenatally, so minus 8 to 9 months, and we go across the lifespan to death. What you have, if we look at the black line, that is the development of the language functions of the brain. The peak of that is about 10 months. The peak of those connection building actions of the brain, the peak is about in 10 months, which is often when kids say their first word. You have all this activity going on, and then all of a sudden it's 10 months and the baby says, mama. Well, it's because of what has just happened over 10 months. And then you see, are you following the black line? And then it goes down, and the end of this period of brain development occurs at about what age? About 7 to 8 years of age. Okay, this is the neurobiology of the child's brain. If you look at the green one, that's the auditory visual systems. Those are actually developed very, very early in life. Kids can see and hear pretty well early in life. The red one is the prefrontal cortex. That is like reasoning, thinking, higher order planning. And you can see those then continue further into life. So I have a 15-year-old at home, 15-year-old, and I have to remember all the time that reasoning and planning is still under development, okay? She cannot reason, she cannot plan. She doesn't understand a whole bunch of things that are rational. But that's because of that part of the brain is continuing to develop. The reason you're here today, the reason you are congregating around this topic is because of that black line. Early childhood, it's not a trivial matter. We don't want to intervene and support young kids because it's the right thing to do, and there's a whole, we're not doing it for trivial matters. We're doing it because our activities need to map on to when is the peak of brain development to make the best difference in a child's life. And it's between birth and roughly 6 or 7 years of age, at least when we talk about the grounding of language skills, literacy skills, basic school achievement. Sierra? Here's something I want you to remember. So what you have here is the brain at birth, and you have all those little neurons, and you have just a few connections. 6 years of age, there's the peak. Remember, this goes with the last slide. That peak of friendship making, the synaptogenesis is at about 6. After 6, the brain prunes, okay? Think about it's the fall, and you have trees in your yard, and there's dead branches. Well, you go in and you scrape out the dead branches to clean things up. So what you see is by 14 years of age, you've pruned out all the synaptic connections that didn't make friends. So you start pruning away. Those opportunities to make those friendships are gone. What do you think your brain looks like? Uh-oh. So take it out 20 or 30 years. One of the things you have to remember as a parent, as an educator, as a librarian, is if you're sitting there with a 4 or 5-year-old kid, their brain is better able to learn something than yours is. We should never, never, never underestimate what a child's capable of because of their brain, okay? The capacity of the young child's brain to develop and learn new information far exceeds yours. The people who are charged with making such critical decisions about kids. It's a little bit ironic, okay? So one of the things that's commonly understood is that early childhood is what we call a very sensitive period of development. It's a period of great potential and also great potential harm. You have a child's brain in this state of wanting to develop these pathways, but the experience isn't there. So we can do more harm to a child than at a later age. On the contrary, if we introduce promising elements in young kids' life, the period of early education, there's more potential than any other time in the child's life because of the way the brain looks. So the point here is we use the word plastic to describe the brain. And in early childhood, the brain is extremely plastic. It's very plastic. It can be changed very readily. Adults' brains are not so plastic. I tried to learn Spanish over the last couple years. I went to Mexico. I took an intensive week-long class. I learned nothing. Nothing. And it's because my brain isn't built the way a 4-year-old's is, okay? Our brains are far less plastic than the child is. So just remember this, that when we build early education problems that give more richer experiences to young kids, we're trying to co-opt this period of great plasticity. It is true that children across the world experience deprivation. 3 times I've gone to Ukraine to work with orphanage staff to train them in providing richer experiences to young kids. Ukrainian Eastern European orphanages look like this. Maybe you've been to them. You have lots and lots and lots of young kids, typically confined to a crib, and it's a constant rotating door of caregivers. They have no single caregiver, ever. Constant turnover. And the goal of an orphanage in Eastern Europe, where you have 200 kids in a relatively small space, is for them to be quiet. And that was actually what astonished me the most about being in Ukrainian orphanages is, number one, how bad they smelled, because I really don't like dill. There's a lot of dill in Eastern Europe. But they're so quiet. When have you ever been around 200 little kids and heard quietness? So there are instances, even in our communities here in Columbus, all you have to do is read the paper any morning, and you see kids being taken away from their parents because they've been deprived, often abused. Okay, so this does happen. What's interesting is in Ukraine, actually, I lie, Romania, they actually did an experiment which showed us convincingly what happens when you take kids from a deprived setting and you put them in a richer setting. And what they did in Romania, they had way too many kids in their orphanages back after they had a dictator. Who sometimes what dictators want is they want to create population explosions so they have more people to dictate, right? So you get lots of women to have babies and you increase the citizenship and so on and so forth. So there were all these unwanted babies in Romania put into orphanages. And some researchers from Harvard and a broader conglomerate, they randomly assigned a group of kids to leave the orphanages to go into foster care. And these weren't very good foster cares. These were foster parents who wanted to make a little bit of money. But the major difference between being in an orphanage and being in a foster care is what? Number one is stability of the caregiver talking to you, and number two?
There's noise, it's not quiet from all kids.
Yeah, it's noisy, more interaction. There's one big one too. What's the big difference? How many kids are in that foster home? Couple. So what happens is the ratio of adults to children goes down. That is a variable that the second you reduce it, kids automatically get more input because the caregivers aren't dividing themselves across 100 kids. Turn to the next slide. And so what they found out is that kids who were removed from institutionalized care and put in these foster cares, they did almost 10 points better on language and cognition measures when they were 4 years of age. The reason this is important is because we believe these things to be true often. If you take kids out of a deprived circumstance, put them in a more enriching one, it's going to be good for them. But we have precious few true experiments that show that that is true. And this is one of those. If you want to talk about the ethics of the experiment, that's a different conversation, because some people question whether this is ethical to do this to kids. Okay, so what are the experiences we want kids to have that do positively affect that brain development, that build those pathways, that have neurons make friends with other neurons? It's really clear from decades of research what helps kids. Direct interactions with others. This is why kids don't learn from TV. They can sit and watch people on the television screen and hear lots of talk, but they don't acquire language and cognition from those. They have to have direct interactions with others. Fine-tuned, sensitive conversations. Fine-tuned means it's dynamic. I say something, you say something, I respond to what you said. There's a dynamic taking place. They need to be cognitively stimulated. Cognitively stimulated. Young kids need to have the experience of doing things that are difficult. They can't just sit and name letters and numbers all day. They've got to experience difficult things that require advanced cognition. They have to explore the environment. They can put things in their mouth. They can touch things. They can try to put pencils in their ears. Stop them. but we want them to do these things. These are the kind of things that cause those neural pathways to develop. So why do these things not happen? This is simple, right? Well, the reality is when we look at many families in society, especially today in 2017, parents are preoccupied with the struggles of life. So I was looking through slides from a couple sessions you had ago recently where you had people, I think, from ODJFS come and talk about childcare subsidies. Does that ring a bell? Oh, it's happening today. Well, and are they here? Good. No, it's great. I'm going to tell you, part of my job is administering an early education center where we work with a lot of families who live in poverty. And just navigating the ODJFS paperwork to get your subsidies is something that I don't think I could do with a PhD. It's very difficult to do all this. We don't ask you to do that kind of thing, but we ask our most vulnerable members of society to do paperwork none of us could, way more complicated than tax returns. So we have caregivers, they're preoccupied with the struggles of life. Everybody here, you're in the Hilltop, you know what I'm saying. Life is difficult for a lot of people. And when your life is difficult, you don't have the capacity to do these kind of things. Generally, the lack of fine-tuned sensitive interactions tends to co-occur with poverty. You know the data. 33% of young kids in Columbus live in a poor home. 1 in 3. I would argue that the effects of poverty on children is siphoning off the greatest resource for what we have in the future. If we have 1 in 3 kids in Columbus not having their brain engineered in the first 5 years of life, that's going to take them through the rest of their life in school and employment. We're just siphoning off our best resource for the future, which is all the little kids running around Hilltop and Franklinton and Wineland Park, okay? So promoting early learning opportunities. One of the reasons you're here today is because you're trying to design something for kids that gives them a leg up, that gives them the opportunity for these enriched experiences every day with sensitive caregivers. There is a huge effort internationally to expand early education for children. These are all the OECD countries, Organization for Economic and Cooperative Development. If you go to the west, go to the left, France, a lot of the European countries, they have an early education spot for every single child. It's a given. It's a given. I've made a mark, the average across all the OECD countries is the little thing with the bars, and I put an arrow where we are. Okay, so the United States, we have, give or take, about 67% of 4-year-olds in center-based care. So there are trends internationally to do what Hilltop is trying to do and what our city is trying to do. Okay? And the reason is that providing early education experiences with kids gives them a leg up. This is the most important time of their life. So let's look at Ohio. There's a report that comes out every year. It's called the State of Pre-K Yearbook. And so it tells you state by state how our state's doing. One of the things we have to acknowledge in Ohio is state support for 3 and 4-year-olds is very, very low. Okay, so this is the percentage of kids, if you go over to 2016, the percentage of kids across the state who are 3 and 4 who are supported via state dollars to attend early education. What do you notice?
Why did it drop so low if you have a percentage?
Usually these things are contingent on governors. And I think we had a large ELI program and that went away. And so we have had very, very low levels of support. Now go to the next slide. Let's look at some other states. Look at Florida. So Florida actually has heavy state investment in preschool, but just for 4-year-olds. One of the challenges with Florida is their quality isn't very good. So everybody's got a slot. Quality isn't very good. Vermont is really, I put Vermont up here because they're not just supporting 4-year-olds, they're supporting 3-year-olds. So they actually have a really relatively high level of 3-year-olds. The point I'm trying to make here is looking to the state for support is probably not the best decision. And so communities coming together like you're doing right now and having a strong mayor ahead of these efforts, that's probably the best mechanism for us currently. So what's our scorecard look like as a state? In terms of quality, there's actually only 3 states who score lower than us in quality at the state level. So Arizona, Indiana, and Florida. In general, when you look at our quality standards, we score pretty low. And we score really low for access for kids. The reason I put this up here is not to slam Ohio, but at least today in 2017, I think the solution has to come from communities. And it has to come from cities. And that's exactly what's happening across the state. You have Dayton and Cleveland and Cincinnati. Everybody's cranking out their own efforts to increase expansion. And it's because we really can't look to the state to fix this for us. So I'm a huge proponent of city efforts and city investments, and I'm very proud of what's happening here in the conversations that we're having and continue to have. I believe that city investments and community level investments are the best lever to improve quality, to increase access, and to target growth. Every time I sit down and talk to people about preschool, the issue of quality comes up. Quality's tough because we don't have agreed upon definition of what quality is. So we have to keep that in mind. Nobody here has the right answer of what quality is. But what happens if we don't attend to quality? What happens as Hilltop moves forward? What if you say all we care about is doubling the slots and we don't pay attention to quality? What happens to those investments? One thing, this is actually technical but important. So quality is really 2 things. It's what we call the structure and the process. Very fancy terms, but very important. Structure are tangible things we can look and see in early childhood programs. Does the teacher have a credential? Is there a curriculum? Is the place safe? These tend to be the things policymakers pay attention to because they're very easy to regulate. This is how much you're going to spend per pupil in your classroom. That's easy. We call that structures, things you can see and feel. But processes are these more abstract aspects of classrooms, like, is the teacher sensitive? Does the teacher challenge kids? Is the teacher happy? Does the teacher seem to like his or her job? Policymakers usually don't want to touch those. Why? Difficult to regulate. All teachers must be happy. All teachers must talk to children. It's very hard to legislate these things. But the reason, and I gave you here 2 examples, a structure we play with all the time is teacher-child ratio. Okay? In early Head Start classrooms, you can't have more than 10 kids per 1 teacher or 2 teachers. In state-level classrooms, you can have 20 to 2. We mess with this all the time. But an example of process is teacher warmth. Teacher warmth is very important to kids' development. Teachers who are warm are sensitive, they're proactive, they're kind, they're responsive, they're empathetic. What's key here is structures affect processes which affect children, okay? So for instance, if you lower the teacher-child ratio, you tend to have teachers who are warmer because they're less stressed and they have fewer kids to care for. As you move forward and think about quality here, think about structures and process and how structures are designed to affect processes or are expected to affect kids. What happens when we don't pay attention to these things? Let's talk about Quebec for a minute. Where's Quebec? It's Canada, okay? So Quebec's kind of cool because they launched universal childcare in 1997. They said every single kid in Quebec is going to have a slot. And so they opened it to all children. By 2000, every kid under 5 had a slot. Isn't that great? Don't you wish you had that in Hilltop, in Columbus? I have a baby, here's your slot, and it was $7 a day. Okay, $7 a day, heavily subsidized by the government. And in fact, it was 0.7% of the gross domestic product of Quebec. So they went whole scale. You could do this in Hilltop, maybe, if you could find the money. But a lot of Tennessee tried to do this. A lot of places, Boston pre-K is doing this. A lot of people are going all in. So one of the reasons Quebec did this is they wanted to boost the economy. And don't forget what happens to the economy when you have more childcare slots for kids. Who goes into the workforce? Moms, okay? And what you see here is there's a massive economic benefit from having childcare in terms of getting more women into the workforce. And that's been demonstrated oftentimes. And so if you look at the data of what happened in Quebec, they made oodles of money back on this investment just in terms of tax returns, okay? And so for every $100 invested, the province itself got $104 back, and the national government got a chunk of change too. So don't forget about this when you think about the economy of the Hilltop and the benefits of investing in spots for kids. But they ignored quality completely. The programs were of very, very low quality. They barely attended to quality. They rushed to implement. This is what's happening in, somebody else just did this too. They rushed to implement and they had to back off because they found out that they were actually harming kids. Come on, if you had a free slot down the road for your kid, you'd drop them there too. I would. I'd be like, okay, you're $7 a day, take care of my kid. But these were low quality slots. And the biggest issue was there was no market for quality. A parent had no way of knowing that's a good quality program and that's not. So parents didn't rush to that program and put that one out of business. There was no market. Consumers didn't know what was good and what was bad. And so because there's no market for quality, consumers could not make good choices. And I won't bore you with the details, but what happened is measures of kids' development actually declined. And it seemed like these programs were harming kids. And I put this up here. I'm an advocate for early childhood expansion. I'm a huge advocate. But we have got to do it right, or we can hurt kids. And it's the kids who are most vulnerable. So we have to create a market for quality. As you go down the path of promoting access to early education in the city and here, we have to help parents be good consumers. You know, you can just look at these and know this is higher quality toothpaste. Because the dental industry, which makes gazillions of dollars, has done lots of good things to make sure you know what quality is. ADA seal of approval, what are the active ingredients, does it have fluoride? And then the big thing is, my dentist recommends, whatever that means. But, you know, maybe our mayor needs to recommend certain programs. Mayor recommended. Okay, so, but we keep that in mind. Okay, I'm just going to close with a couple things that, from my perspective, would be very helpful to keep on the radar as you continue your very important work. So number one, we've got to break down barriers that keep programs from getting into the quality rating improvement system. Our quality rating improvement system is not perfect. It can be improved, but it is the start of creating a market for quality, okay? There are really innovative things that places are doing, like Cincinnati Preschool Promise. That is a massive expansion of preschool in Cincinnati. It's funded by a school levy, and they have funds earmarked to do assessments. A program can invite in an assessment and come up with a work plan, and these are 0, 1, and 2-star programs. They are basically coached to a higher level. Those are the kind of things we can think about. Cincinnati's doing it, we should too. You're being very patient. You know you're going to deal with this all day, right? Okay. The next one is we have got to compensate teachers adequately. There is no easy solution here, but just remember what I said. If we don't do this right, we could harm kids. And doing this wrong is putting minimum wage educators in a classroom responsible for 20 kids, and those teachers have no benefits and they're stressed. That's not a solution. There are innovative ways to tackle this. For instance, in North Carolina and Florida, they have a massive trust of resources. These pay supplements to teachers. If a teacher works in a certain program and makes certain wages, they can apply for pay supplements. And there is very good research showing that teachers who receive these supplements, they stay in their job longer, they're happier, there's less turnover, there's less stress, it leads to better programs. We have to look for innovations, and there's other places that are playing with these. I want to go on record saying that provision of high-quality early education is rocket science. If you have a skilled educator in our room, they're to do all these things. They need to know how do kids develop. They need to know how to assess. They need to differentiate. They need to have good content areas, skills, math, and social, emotional, and language and literacy. They need to understand curriculum and learning standards and grouping practices and safety and discipline and how to build healthy relationships with homes. This is not trivial. I would argue that there isn't a person in this room, except people who have worked for a long time with young children, who could take this on and would be willing to do it for $8 an hour. Okay? This is hard stuff, and we have got to appreciate that. Then finally, as you move forward, think about innovative things you can do to create a market for quality so that your caregivers in Hilltop would know that's the program their kids should be in, and that's not the right one. There are innovative things you can do. You can do campaigns. Why isn't Johnny in preschool? This was an effort by Chicago parents to try to create a market for quality. New York City has taken this on as well. But unless consumers have a tool to know that program A is better than B, they're going to put their kids in B because they don't know better. So we've got to create a market for high-quality programs. You can skip that. The final point I'm going to make is that you're already doing this. The fact that you're here and you're having all these very thoughtful conversations with all the right people at the table, you're doing the right thing by being thoughtful and being comprehensive and engineering the best program you can. There are models out there. For instance, probably the biggest success story in early education expansion was the state of Georgia. And Georgia funded, they actually have universal access for 4-year-olds and a lot of 3-year-olds. How do they pay for this? The lottery. Okay? And Georgia was really smart because they set this up in advance to have very high standards. They pay for 6.5 hours a day, not the 2.5 hour stuff we see coming out of lots of governor's offices. Teachers must have a bachelor's degree. They have minimal salary standards you've got to pay for your teachers, and they have relatively robust early learning standards you need to adhere to. And if you look at kids who are in their program versus kids who are not, they do much better in academic skills, including both literacy and math. We can engineer these right if you take the time, like you are here today, to engineer, to be thoughtful, to move forward together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Justice. That was extremely interesting, and Dr. Justice has been very influential in the library's approach and development of our early literacy work, and she hit on a number of key points. Just going to mention a few that stuck out to me. The importance of that early brain development is amazing, and a little bit it brings to mind the urgency of getting started early. Can you hear me now? Okay. Getting started early, the idea that the brain is more plastic and predisposed to learn even than adults are, that really struck me. And just that importance of having interactions and experiences, the fact that we need to give kids and caregivers need to give kids a lot of different inputs so that their brain can develop, really hit home to me. Mike, any thoughts on?
We have several pastors in the room, and watching this powerful presentation, I was thinking, this is sort of like Saul becoming Paul. I mean, it changes you when you realize how powerful that 0 to 5 data evidence is. So I guess additional takeaways were the importance of quality. There being a chasm between pre-K and quality. Pre-K, the need to have smart policies for expansion, creating a market for quality. How do we create a market for quality, and investing in teachers? I'm an old journalist, an old newspaper guy, and you look for, sell quotes, things that jump out. And her comment about expecting quality when you're paying somebody $8 an hour to do this mountain-moving work. I mean, to me, that's sort of the lead of the story if I were back in the newsroom, writing something. So we are fortunate to have with us 4 distinguished panelists to help digest and discuss some of what we've learned from Dr. Justice's commentary. And John, I think it's you who are kicking this off, or am I kicking this off?
Before we go forward, do we have the slide for the, all right, just a quick note. This slide is a summary of some of the barriers, and we're going to talk about barriers in this panel. This is some of the high points that came up at our community meeting the other night that a lot of you attended. In your packet, you also have a much more detailed list and minutes of that meeting, and it was a very good meeting, a lot of really good input on barriers, and we want to talk more about that today. And so, and then I think you.
Okay. At the recent community forum that we had, we asked members of the community their thoughts on barriers to pre-K participation. We're asking the same questions of this distinguished panel. Please help me welcome Terry Ragland, an education consultant, Linda Day Mackesy, Senior Vice President of the YMCA of Central Ohio, Andy Douglas, the parent of a Hilltop preschooler, and Sharice Berry, a teacher at Hilltop Preschool. Terry Ragland is an education consultant specializing in developmentally appropriate practice, tiered quality rating and improvement systems, accreditation, child care licensing, and regulatory compliance. Terry has an undergraduate degree in social science and a master's of education in curriculum and instruction with a dual concentration in early childhood education and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics education for pre-K through 12th grade. Terry is an active member of the historic Oakley Full Gospel Baptist Church that has been rooted in the heart of the Hilltop community for over 120 years. She lives in Columbus, Ohio with her college sweetheart, James Ragland, and their 2 children, JC and Nia. Linda Day Mackesy has a master's degree in social work and 32 years of experience working in the field of early childhood education. At the Y, Linda oversees 100 different programs for children aged birth to age 18, including infant toddler programs, Head Start, Columbus Kids, Spark, Early Intervention, after-school programs, summer day camp, and teen programs. Linda and her husband John have 4 children. All 4 are graduates of YMCA Early Learning Centers. Andy Douglas is a parent and a resident of the Central Hilltop. She has 3 young children, ages 9 months to 5 years old, and has lived in the Central Hilltop for 8 years. She and her husband moved to the Hilltop to work with Faith Community Church and has led a ministry to mothers of small children for several years. Her daughter attended Hilltop Preschool and is now in kindergarten at John Burroughs Elementary. Andy has a desire to see moms and children of the Hilltop thrive and reach their God-given potential. Sharice Berry is a teacher at the Hilltop Preschool. She is a mother of 2 boys, ages 12 and 14, who both play football in Arlington. She was born and raised on Wayne Avenue on the Hilltop and graduated from Briggs High School. She has a passion for working with children and watching them progress, and while playing a positive role in their growth. She has been with Hilltop Preschool for 4 years now. John's going to start the questioning off for us.
So we're going to start with Terry. Good morning. Terry, we just heard from Dr. Justice on the importance of early learning. Specifically, she noted the importance of quality. As someone who has a lot of experience helping educators in schools think about quality, what do you see as the barriers for providers in achieving high quality?
Absolutely. Adequate funding is definitely a number one barrier for providers to achieving quality. I always like to start off with stating that investing early allows us to shape the future. Investing later chains us to fixing missed opportunities of our past. And those missed opportunities, we will find them in special education classes later on down the line. And unfortunately, there's a pipeline straight from prison, from preschool to prison. So we have to understand that there is a connection there. Adequate funding, and you need to have adequate funding for to be able to increase teacher pay, increase quality, to hire skilled teachers, increase your star ratings, and to obtain and maintain a rating. There's also funding necessary to secure a space that is adequate for an appropriate child care center.
So obviously, there's a lot of conditions that could be barriers. Beyond funding, what do you think are maybe the most important?
Beyond funding, I would definitely argue that high-quality teachers. We talked about everything that a teacher is responsible for, from planning the curriculum, assessing, screening and assessments. You have to have a quality teacher to be able to know what exactly to expect in a day-to-day operation of an early childhood classroom. Young children at this age, their needs are unique, and high-quality teachers, they understand what developmentally appropriate practice is. Early childhood occurs, like Dr. Justice said, between the ages from birth to age 8. And it's during this time that children go through the most rapid brain development. So I would definitely say the quality teachers is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I was struck by the slide Dr. Justice had, or her comment that this is rocket science, and she listed all the things that a good teacher has to be concerned about. Yet we've heard that many teachers actually they're undereducated or in some other way not prepared. Why is that?
Absolutely. You can't get the best teachers. You get what you pay for, unfortunately. You have teachers who are making minimum wage. They're coming in. I approach early childhood as a holistically. You have the whole child coming into your preschool classroom. So you have the trauma and stress of poverty from their families. They may not understand the stressors that they're living in is poverty, but we absolutely see those effects in the classroom from the teachers. I'll never forget, as a program director, I encouraged one of my teachers to go back to school and obtain her degree, an associate's degree. And when it came time for her to get the earned bonus, or the earned increase, she had to decline because she would lose her benefits for her own children. And so things like that, a worthy wage is absolutely something that I believe is missed. I think the average in the state of Ohio is $21,000, and that's before taxes are taken out for a pre-K teacher. Preschool across the country, the average is $25,000. Into our school districts across the country, starting off, you may be fortunate to have $40,000, $54,000 with benefits. We don't see that in early childhood.
It's kind of ironic that what we've heard today from Dr. Justice is these are the critical years, the years where children build their foundation for later learning, and yet what I'm hearing you say is we're not paying them at all, hardly.
Absolutely.
What do you think can be done with that? Or what would you like to see be done?
I think Dr. Justice, she started out the conversation as I would have, to have a mayor behind us and understanding the importance of early childhood is definitely key. I always say talk is cheap. Talking points are expensive because we will be chained to fixing, again, those missed opportunities. So having some guidance, some leadership taken from the mayor's office, I believe we are on, I know that we're on the right track. Exposing excuse me, the need for early childhood, having these community conversations, and Dr. Justice is exactly right. It has to come from the community. Again, I'll say, the whole child comes to school. So they're bringing their families with them, they're bringing their neighborhoods with them. So having leadership from and exposure to the need for early childhood or quality early childhood does have to come from our community leaders, our public servants.
Thank you, Terry. Is there anything else you'd like to say or make sure that we know as we move on?
I'm pleased to be a part of the conversation, exposing the need for early childhood. I thank you all for being here. We can't do this alone. This is something that is that would shape our future. So thank you.
Thank you. So I want to move on to Andy, who, as you heard, is a parent on the Hilltop with kids who have been in preschool on the Hilltop. I guess my first question, Andy, is could you tell us about your decision-making process in choosing an early learning program for your child? What did you look for?
Yeah, so can everybody hear me? So I looked for a place that was safe, not just like physically safe, but an emotionally safe place for my child, a place that was affordable, and a place that was nearby that would be easy to get my child there. And I think that those are pretty indicative of what other parents that I work with, that they look for for their kids too. I also wanted a place that was recommended. I mean, if I've not been in the preschool, I want to know from other people who have, and the star rating did play into a fact of what I picked. Interestingly, your staff at the library actually helped recommend the Hilltop Preschool because of, I think you guys did storytime programs in different preschools, and so they said, based on being in the school, these are the ones that they thought were quality. And so they had a couple, and Hilltop Preschool is the closest to my house.
One thing we know, though, is that as people go through that process, there are other important, more pragmatic things like convenience and cost.
Yeah.
The quality of education provided is not maybe sometimes one of the most important considerations from what I've heard and what we've heard from other people. Does that surprise you?
So I feel like maybe that might not be completely true. I believe that safety, affordability, and location are showstoppers. So if you don't have those, then you can't even go further to ask if the program's quality. But I do think that the parents that that have sent their kids with my children to preschool do care about quality, but they're not just looking at it from an academic standpoint. It's looking at kind of the quality is a whole program to the parents that I've talked to, that it needs to be, like the facility needs to be a safe place, that needs to be a nice place for their children to be, that it needs to be, we had emailed back and forth, and he said one of the responses in a survey was if a place smelled good, which is actually kind of sad because that means parents have been to places that don't.
Yeah.
And so I do think that maybe the academic aspect of quality may not be at the top of parents' lists, but I do think that parents do want to send their kids to a place that is a good place for them to be. And it's not just, if your kid can't write their name when they're done, but they are happy and loved and that they're learning to get along with others, and parents also value that, along with writing their name, and learning the things that help them get ready for kindergarten. But I think maybe sometimes we define quality just in like an academic stance, but then as Dr. Justice said, that it's kind of the whole program. And I do think the parents on the Hilltop do care about maybe the other issues, maybe even more than academics, but they do care about quality.
So it sounds like if we could cover the transportation and the cost, that there's still going to be a lot of interest in quality.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you think about, we run into a lot of parents, and you probably know them too, who just don't see the need. They don't need child care. They're perfectly happy having their kids at home.
So that's me. I don't need childcare for my daughter in preschool, but that also meant that I could be picky, that I didn't have to send my kid just anywhere because I had to go to work, that I would only send my child to a place that I felt was going to be a quality place. And so our church, the kids that are in our preschool class, my goal was to have them be aware of all the preschool programs and to really encourage them to enroll their kids in preschool. And they were only willing to do that if they knew that their kids were going to be in a safe place, that they were loved and were growing. And so some of them were in this Columbus School District preschool program, some of them were at Hilltop Preschool, some of them were in Head Start. But because they could be picky, because they didn't need the child care aspect of it, quality was like forefront. And then along with that is that they really relied on recommendations and word of mouth of people who had already put their kids through those programs to pick what was quality.
Makes sense. Do you think that raising people's awareness on the importance of early learning, like we heard from Dr. Justice, would be effective in convincing parents that they maybe should look at preschool?
Yeah, I mean, just even as a parent, I've learned a lot from Dr. Justice's presentation, and I think that teaching parents about child development is always an opportunity, but I do think that the word of mouth, like helping other parents share the information that they have learned is going to be, for the Hilltop, is one of the most effective ways for getting parents on board.
So if you're an engaged parent interested in preschool, as you obviously are or have been at times, and you want to send your child to a high-quality provider, how do you find one?
Yeah, so I asked the library because I was there for story time.
This is all set up, folks.
But you know, I don't think it's very easy. I think the star quality helps, but I think a lot of it is done by word of mouth. So my daughter's friends who went to preschool with her, I encouraged their parents to enroll them in preschool because, and they looked at it because I had said, oh, I know the people here. I know that, you know, you can trust them. And even for, you know, I had a friend whose son went to preschool at John Burroughs, and she's like, I don't know. I said, well, I know people that work there, and I know that they care about children, and so it's something you should look at. So I think word of mouth is huge, but I do think the star quality does help.
Okay. And I don't want to totally ignore the transportation issue, because we do hear that a lot.
Yeah.
What do you think of that potential barrier, or what have you seen with families you've talked to, or what have you seen with maybe organizations that have solved the transportation problem?
I don't know if I've seen anybody solve the transportation problem, unless
Okay.
they're bused somewhere. That's the only consistent thing.
Okay.
But I do think it's a big problem. Even my daughter's friends, like, you know, the stresses of poverty are very real, that if you're moving because you suddenly can't afford the house that you're in, then you have to move. Are you moving close enough still to the preschool to be able to walk them there? Or, you know, I would give people rides. So do you have somebody who can transport your children? I have friends they had it all set up. Their neighbor was going to give their kid a ride. They were all going to go, and then their neighbor moved. And now, you know, we're in Central Hilltop, the Head Start program is too far to walk. And, you know, there's just pockets where it is accessible. You can walk there, but then there are lots of pockets where you can't walk. So
Right.
Transportation is a big issue.
Okay. Are there any other barriers you'd like to bring up before we move on?
Just the things we've already talked about, the stretches of poverty, like housing, food, security, jobs, transportation. Those are very real, and we've talked about them.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, John. It's my privilege to quiz Linda Day Mackesy, who, you remember from her introduction, has been toiling in these vineyards of early childhood education for 32 years. Despite that, I'm still a lot older than Linda is. She's at the YMCA, which has a great reputation for the quality of their early childhood operations. And as a former board member of the YM, I can tell you that Linda is widely esteemed for continually pushing best practices in early childhood education. So then correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the YM's programs are all 5-star programs. And so you're an appropriate person to ask, how has the Y over time overcome barriers to high quality, and what lessons can we carry on to further that work with other programs?
So our early childhood programs are rated by Step Up to Quality and nationally accredited, but we are only able to do this because of some private investment. So we are always chasing grant dollars from United Way, PNC, AEP, Ohio Capital Corporation, to provide more money to buy supplies, equipment, to hold teacher training, and really without those additional dollars, it would be impossible for us to be at the level of quality that we are. So I am constantly grant writing and out begging, basically, for more resources to subsidize what we receive from all of the public sources. I do want to mention, you know, as Dr. Justice was talking about other communities that have tried things, we had a very successful ELI or ELI program, and we saw the biggest jumps forward in quality across all of Franklin County because we did have more per child. We had money for social workers through Action for Children. We provided more resource to really move the needle and pay teachers more, pay for education with CDAs, Child Development Associates. So that was one example of Ohio really focusing on quality and accessibility for children. And another private initiative about 10 years ago was the Champion of Children. And so a group of bankers and other interested parties got together and provided child care programs with more resources. And to get those dollars, you had to pay a certain minimum amount to your teachers. It was genius. It was, if you want our funds, then this is the minimum that you can pay teachers, and we had to sign off on that. So I just wanted to mention a couple of local, very successful initiatives, and as Dr. Justice pointed out, when politicians change over, then those programs sometimes go away, and then we had the bank crisis of 2008 that kind of took out the Champion of Children program, but those are just two examples I wanted to mention.
So it's probably a good bet we'll be fighting for those dollars for as long as we're all still around on this planet, trying to push forward this initiative. Other than funding, what do you see as the primary barriers for providers?
I think finding enough qualified teachers. So we all know from the research that we want teachers with credentials. We want the CDAs, we want the bachelors in early childhood education, but it's very difficult to find enough teachers for the number of programs that we have, and then to keep them, because there is a lure of higher paying jobs in public school settings, and so we're constantly looking and recruiting and trying to make our teachers very happy, but that is a barrier for us at the Y. We've not solved that one, and we keep trying to move forward by raising the salaries 50 cents an hour or $1 an hour, but it is a very big barrier, as Terry mentioned.
Tell us a little bit, if you could, Linda, about awareness, lack of awareness, and how you go about, and how we might go about breaking down that barrier.
So one of the programs where I have more resources is the Head Start program. We received a grant 4 years ago, and in that program we have social workers, family advocates, who are able to go door to door. And we rent bouncy houses, we give away free food, and parents flock to us, right? Food's always important. And so in that program, I do have more funding per child to be able to do some unusual things, like like put on a little mini fair with the bouncy house. And so as parents are standing around, our staff are talking to them about how important it is to start school before age 5. And so I think it is a really effective way to engage parents, talk about the achievement gap, and how we don't want their child to be behind when they start kindergarten at age 5, and that this is a free program with Head Start. There are no co-pays, and that's huge, because just a small amount per week or per month is a huge barrier for low-income families. So I would point to that word of mouth and special events in the family's neighborhood just down the street as being a really effective way to raise parent awareness that early education is important. We want your child to go to school before age 5.
So if we find ourselves making progress on the funding side, and we find ourselves making progress, taking some of those tips to heart on the awareness, getting awareness up, and so people are realizing the criticality of 0-5, do you see other reasons parents may have for not enrolling their children?
I do think there's a fear, which came up at our evening forum. If you are not documented, what does that mean? That when you sign up for publicly funded childcare or Head Start, will they be found out? Will something happen with their immigration status, et cetera? So that's a really difficult barrier. I also think that language is a barrier. So we hire interpreters to help parents with their enrollment paperwork. At our family events, we have interpreters. At just every point where they're interacting with our YMCA program, we know that we're going to have to get over the language barrier.
We heard Terry mention that there are issues with teacher retention. We don't pay them very much. We know that children need stability, as Dr. Justice emphasized, stability and consistency, especially those who experience early trauma. Why do you think, in your experience, teachers leave centers, and how can we do a better job with retention efforts?
So teachers need to pay their bills, and so that's the most common reason that our teachers leave our YMCA centers. On the other hand, we do have a lot of teachers that have been with us for 10 or 15 or 20 years, and the retention is because they love the children, they love the parents, they love their coworkers, and there's a real camaraderie that's built when you are going for Step Up to Quality rating or national accreditation rating, that you have one goal and you're all working together, and they don't want to let their team down by leaving. And the Y is fortunate to have some other things to offer our teachers with YMCA membership, where they can be healthy at our YMCA branches. We also have some tuition assistance because we take students from OSU and Columbus State who are studying early childhood education, and in return we get some college credits that we can then give to our staff who are furthering their education. So we were lucky to be a large organization that can offer some extra things that aid with teacher retention.
Thank you. And lastly, what question did I fail to ask you, given all your experience, that I should have asked, or what point, what takeaway should we include in our minutes that we have failed to do so far with our conversation with you?
Well, as I've read the information in the notebook, which is really great, I see that other communities have really come together and done a public awareness campaign around early childhood education, and I think it's time for us to work together and do something on the Hilltop, and then maybe that can be expanded to the rest of Columbus and Franklin County. But just to be all on one page and know this is critical, and when you see the evidence, you have to believe and you have to want to help. And so I would highly recommend that we think about a way to have a public awareness campaign, more bouncy houses, more food, and just the coordination. I feel sad that people don't know my centers in the area. I have 5 in the area. When I looked at the Celebrate One packet, I didn't see the Y listed as a community center on the Hilltop, and we have a beautiful branch, which is a community center. I sit in the lobby and I see hundreds of people of all ages, and it's maybe just not advertised well. So maybe we need to do a better job of advertising what's here and welcoming people in and figuring out what the barriers are to people being aware of the preschools that are already here that are not fully enrolled, and the Hilltop Y is a resource for a community center.
Thank you. Be careful what you ask for. You just added to our to-do list. So
That's all right.
Thank you, Linda.
I welcome that.
Sharice Berry. Sharice is doing the hard work right here in the Hilltop, at the Hilltop Preschool, a top-rated preschool, by the way. She sees quality every day, and she's working hard to make sure that we have this resources every day right here in the center of the Hilltop. Sharice, we know our teachers can only do so much. We know that we could have a 5-star center, and we can also have a highly qualified teacher. But if students go home and what they learn is not reinforced, as Dr. Justice touched on, that child may still not be ready for kindergarten. You work with parents every day. What strategies do you and your colleagues at Hilltop Preschool use to try to get that critical engagement that we need?
Well, at Hilltop Preschool, we know that parent engagement is very important. So for us, we encourage parents. We constantly encourage parents to participate in different activities we have. Almost every month, we're having activities as far as family party days. And these party days take place during the school hour where parents are able to come in, or grandparents or whoever is the family member may come in with the child, and they're participating in learning activities. We also offer lunch. So monthly, we're having activities, at least once a month, that we have activities for. It's a regular, not a regular school day, but a day of the week that school would be in session, that parents will be dropping their children off, so they're able to come in and have that time to participate in activities.
In your experience at the Hilltop Preschool, do you see a real difference in the children who have an engaged parent and those do not? Bring it home for us.
Well, it's hard to say, but we do see a difference a lot of times in attendance. Also, as far as we have a volunteer who comes in and provides homework packets weekly for our children. So a lot of times when parents are engaged, we see those packets come back, and their attendance is a little better when parents are really engaged. Also, we know that relationships matter. So like I said, we encourage parents to be involved. We have an open door policy where parents are able to come in at any time to view what their children are doing, and we just make sure that we keep the lines of communication open in the morning and at pickup, and let the parents know what their child have done for the day so that they have a feedback.
I just asked Linda about teacher retention. Are there other reasons that teachers leave and that turnover is so high in your experience?
A lot of times, preschool teachers are not considered professionals. We're looked at sometimes as babysitters, or, that we're not in a profession. So that is a reason, and also benefits. A lot of times there's no benefits offered. So that's hard for ones who are raising families, and also the pay. I've heard that mentioned several times. As you said, there's a lot of things that we're responsible for, and a lot of times, if you're not compensated for those, it's hard to uphold that end of it.
You're there doing the hard work every day. What keeps you there?
I'm actually at Hilltop Preschool. It is because this is home to me. I was raised on the Hilltop, so I have a passion for it. But besides that, at Hilltop, I do receive competitive pay. And also, we aren't offered medical benefits, but we do have other things. So we do have a little vision package. We do have dental. So we're compensated in other ways. So.
Did you work at other centers before coming to Hilltop?
I've been at daycares, not an actual preschool. So there is a difference as far as us implementing curriculum, keeping up with the Ohio Early Learning Standards. We're making sure that everything is incorporated in our planning.
And you knew this was coming. What takeaways, tips can you give us, or what question can you answer that we failed to ask that would be beneficial for our work product here?
I just think that it's good for everyone to know, like I said, being born and raised in the Hilltop and still being in the Hilltop. As Andy mentioned before, there are a lot of barriers that parents face as far as the stresses of poverty. So I also think that it's important for us to remember that teachers, like you said before, we have to support our families. And it's a challenge to support your family sometimes when you're not paid at a rate that is okay for you to be able to handle what you need to in your family, your household. So just as far as teachers work hard, so we work hard. So, it's nice that when you're able to be compensated and be rewarded for what you do.
Thank you, Sharice. We've had tremendous input from our 4 panelists, so thank you all. With that, I think we are ready to move into our next segment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Tara, Carrie, Linda, Andy, and Sharice. Some themes are starting to come into focus here, I think, for barriers. We've talked a lot about barriers so far. For providers, it's funding and qualified teachers. For parents, it's awareness, transportation, and in some cases, a lack of recognition of the importance of early learning. So please keep those in mind as we move into this next panel, in which we'll be looking at some examples from other areas of communities who have walked this path before us. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Please welcome to my right, Candace Nespaka. Is that right?
Nespeka.
Nespeka.
Okay.
That wasn't right at all.
It's fine. No one usually gets that one. It's fine.
Candace is the principal at Linden Park Neighborhood Early Childhood Education Center. To her right, Dr. Angel Rhodes is the Officer of Early Childhood Education and Development in the Governor's Office. And Dr. Eric Karlock, I've practiced these, who is CEO of Action for Children, which a lot of you are probably familiar with. These experts are going to give us state examples of successful expansion. They're going to give us examples of expansion right here in Columbus, at the state level, and at the national level. So to begin with Candace, Candace is a native of Youngstown, lives in Lewis Center with her husband and 2 children. Candace has a bachelor's in elementary education from Youngstown State University and a master's in education administration from The Ohio State University, where she also earned her principal and superintendent licensure. Ms. Nespeka is a member of and certified mentor with the National Association of Elementary School Administrators, National Association of Education of Young Children, and the Ohio Association of Elementary School Administrators. She has been employed by Columbus City Schools for 23.8 years, to be exact, where she served in the past 17 as an administrator. Currently, she is the proud principal supervisor of Linden Park Neighborhood Early Childhood Education Center and Columbus City classrooms at Franklin County Board of Disabilities. Candace also serves as an adjunct instructor at Ashland University. Candace is now going to give us a presentation.
And while I talk to you, I could probably say just about anything because you're going to see our cute little pictures up there. So I think it won't matter once you see our kids. The slides that I brought in this morning are actually of our journey last year, creating and opening the Linden Park Neighborhood Center. And I really do, I think they speak for themselves. And while I explain to you sort of how our center is comprised, then you can see some of the activities and the empty space we started with and what it looked like towards the middle and the end. So even though we're certainly not at the end, we're still growing day by day by day. I want to thank you so much for letting me be a part of this discussion this morning. I joked with my boss and said, if I'm going to be somewhere on Saturday morning for work, this is actually okay to be here for work on Saturday, so glad to be with you. As they stated, I'm the principal at the Linden Park Neighborhood Early Childhood Education Center, and that is in the North Linden area. We're located right off in between Hudson and Weber, and so right smack in the middle of the neighborhood on Dresden and Myrtle. So if you know the area at all, Linden Rec Center is sort of, I say it's in our backyard, so that's very close to us. So that's the area where we are. If you look at any of the paperwork from Celebrate One that's sitting with you, you can see the infant mortality rates, and the highest is the Linden area. It's absolutely I mean, it just makes my stomach sick when I look at the numbers. So we're dealing with many of the same issues in the Linden area as, you know, you've discussed multiple times this morning. Through the collaboration with City of Columbus and our district and partner providers, what we did was we came together to create the center that we're operating now. We have 6 classrooms. 4 of those classrooms are Columbus City Schools. 1 classroom is Columbus Early Learning Centers, and then 1 classroom is Child Development Council. So we have a CDC classroom, CELC, and then our Columbus City classrooms. We can't find anything like this so far, where a public school system housed the building, and we added in CDC and CELC as our partner providers to work right alongside of our district teachers. Some of the reasons, I mean, I wish you could experience it, and I'm gonna invite you to do that anytime. We are very informal. When I have to be formal, it's uncomfortable for me. We're very, and anyone who's had to talk to me or meet with me know that. My staff's the same way. We want you to come, experience it, and feel it. There's one thing to talk about and even just look at pictures, but you kind of have to feel it. I'm a parent also, and when I was looking for childcare, I walked in, and if there was a smell or a teacher or a staff member didn't quite I didn't have the feeling, I mean, it didn't take long. It's a very short visit when you walk in and you know that there's something not right and you just don't feel like you're ready to send your child there. With my second one, I ended up staying home for 10 months, which I learned I'm not a good stay-at-home mom. So I went back to work. I was like, can I come back now? It's really hard. With that one, I stayed home because I just couldn't find somewhere at the time. So I think we've lived those struggles with you. Our center came together, like I said, with that Early Start grant. And the 6 classrooms, in our Columbus City School classrooms, we have varied models, which I think is important to see, you know, and we're not really experimenting, but we're trying to look at data after we do this and see what numbers work and what works for the children we're serving. Our 2 Columbus City classrooms that are gen ed classes, general education teachers, so they're early childhood teachers with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, but they're general education. So those 2 classrooms have 20 kids. Those are classrooms comprised of 12 general education kids and 8 students with IEPs. Those students are served with an itinerant teacher. And when I say itinerant teacher, that means a teacher trained in early intervention, special education, who's certified to teach special education for early childhood. And that teacher is the one who takes care of the IEP goals and manages that student's special needs within the classroom and with the typically developing peers. The other 2 Columbus City classrooms are 6 and 6. And I've learned over my last year and a half moving into more of a focused early childhood area and career, we throw these numbers around and people go, what are you talking about 6 and 6? So when I say 6 and 6, our other 2 Columbus City classrooms are comprised of 6 general education students and then 6 typically developing peers, or 6 students with IEPs. If you're a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or a neighbor of a child who you care about, have you ever met a 4-year-old who doesn't have special needs? Children are honest, I mean, they're all over the place. When I say that, I need to draw attention to the fact that just because one child has an IEP and we've identified specific goals, their little friend right next to them may have similar things they're gonna work on. Maybe we identify the child and they qualify later for services, maybe they don't, but they're learning from each other, so it's very important for us. Some of the important things to consider when looking at what you're getting ready to do. In Columbus City Schools, our classrooms are licensed by Ohio Department of Education. Classrooms with CDC and CELC are licensed by Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. So under one roof, we have 2 licensing agencies. we've had my friends get to sit in conversations to help us through some of the barriers that come with having two licensing agencies under one roof. So we're working through some of those things, and honestly, we're so much farther ahead than just 6 months ago to work through some of those things. That's just one of the things to consider when you're utilizing that type of a model and having partner providers with you. So that's one thing I wanted to bring to light. Some of the amazing things that were put in place, and I give, Rhonda credit and her team and Matt that worked this to make this happen. Everyone in the center has to have similar educational backgrounds. They're paid on a similar scale. It's not equal, but it's a similar scale. And why that was important, and as an administrator, I knew it was important but when I got there and I realized, okay, I've got colleagues working right next to each other. If we would have moved in Columbus City school teachers who are paid at a certain rate, and then I have someone right next door and I'm asking them to do the same level of work, the same quality, for the same hours, but yet they're going to get paid significantly less, the quality of the center would not have been the same. So compensation for the partners needed to be similar. So that was a huge piece that you need to think about for what you're getting ready to do. Curriculum, we utilize the same curriculum. They attend the same professional developments. We operate on the same schedule. One of the schedule pieces that was amazing that came out of this, Columbus Early Learning Centers offers morning and aftercare. So 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., Columbus Early Learning Centers offers their before care, and then 4 to 6 they have aftercare, which means my families who are working, and I would normally look at them in a typical elementary school in Columbus City Schools and say, oh, pre-K students can't attend our latchkey program. Now I have somewhere to send that parent, and I can say, you're more than welcome to apply with our partner provider for before care and after care. So I think when you're thinking through partners, if that's where this is going to go, that's maybe a piece that is important, because again, coming from a working mom, the first things, I love the way you said it. You know what? Yeah, we care about quality, but you know what? When I have to get to work in order to pay my bills, it's going to be location. Can I get my kid there? And, then I'm going to walk in and see if my child fits and how the staff reacts. So that's a very important piece is can I get my child there, and are they open when I need them to be open? Community outreach was a very important piece of this, and I laugh about the name of the center because it's so ridiculously long, and our board had to approve the name, because if you work with Columbus City Schools very much, you know that we have lots of processes in place that a principal looks and goes, can we just do this and move on? But there's a whole set of processes that have to go, and it was go before the board to get the name of the center. And I get it now. We're a neighborhood early childhood education center. Every piece of that name is important. We're in Linden. We're important to the neighborhood. We want to be important to the neighborhood. We're early childhood education. We're not a child care center. And every piece of that turned into an important piece. When we came together, we walked through the neighborhood and got to know the neighbors. Yes, people looked at me like I had lost my mind, because they had no idea why I was knocking on their door. Matt and Rhonda were with us. We had some fun, walks through the neighborhood and just trying to get to know people, to say, this is what we're doing. We're going to take over the building. We're going to make things get things cleaned up. So many neighbors were just very happy that we were taking a building that was not being utilized and putting some life back into it. And then even more once the kids got there, and there's laughter and there's playing, and there's also swing sets for their children to play on right across the street. So, that gave the community a place to go also. One of the huge pieces with the parent and family involvement is that we were gifted with a full-time parent engagement family coordinator. So Lisa German is our parent engagement coordinator. She's full-time. She works with our entire department, but she's housed at Linden Park. One of the greatest days came later in the school year when Lisa and I finally had a moment to breathe, and we left the building, got in my car, we had gotten on the Action for Children site, got the list, and went to home providers. And it was, you know, Auntie so-and-so's daycare, Grandma Sally's daycare, whatever it was, Sunshine Learning Care, you know, everyone has their little sign out. And we knocked on doors. And again, I had my Columbus City badge on, so when I knocked on the door, they would peep out the door at me or look through the blinds or, you know, look out a sneaky little edge of the window, which I've been a principal 17 years, I know that game. I'm like, I see you. But they're trying to figure out who is at the door. Once we were in and started talking and built some trust with that home care provider, they said, I thought you were ODGFS or Children's Services. And they didn't want to open that door. Sorry, where's my ODGFS people? I'm sorry. I'm just telling you, this is reality. Why we reached out was to say, you're in our neighborhood. You're in the middle of Linden. We are too. We're Columbus City Schools. We have more money to do things than you do. Now, granted, it's not never-ending funds, trust me, but I have more than that home care provider who's trying to do the same thing. So what can I do to help and support them? She and I had the best day. We ended up with 4 people who actually opened the door for us and were home. We walked in, they had random kids who looked at us like, who's here? We talked to the kids, they invited us to sit down, we saw the things the children were doing, and then we said to those home care providers, what is it they had stickers on their door that said 1-star center provider, 2-star center provider. They're proud of what they're doing. But you know what I heard? They would love to be a 4-star or a 5-star center provider. So Lisa and I said, what is it that's holding you back? What are you missing? You know, I just need a cabinet so that it's a little bit lower to put my manipulatives on because I can't get my science stuff. I bought the science stuff, but I had to save to get it, and I can't put it out where it's reachable for my such and such age. Can you fathom? It's a cabinet and somewhere to put it. So simple things we're trying to kind of help those barriers, help these childcare providers in the home who are doing the same things we're doing, and they care. They really do care, but we need to get those barriers taken care of for them. So we welcomed them into our building. I showed them where we were. We had them attend NICE with us at our Center for Professional Development. So the home care providers came and did COSI workshop. They did, and they left with materials because luckily I had extra stuff. So I sent them home with materials. You would have thought I bought them a car. I was like, this is just science stuff that we had that we can, you know, we're partnering. We're in this together. So that was a huge piece as far as the family involvement in the community. Am I talking too long?
No, it's very informative. You've answered a lot of the questions that I had
Sorry.
for you because that was
I get
very thorough,
excited.
and I like the excitement. It's one of the things that I really like that you said, and we heard it earlier in the day, is that it sounds like there's a sense of camaraderie that's being built, and that sounds important. And even though we've heard a few things about how the star rating is a real challenge to get and understand and implement, it sounds like the staff there are on board with that and even eager to try to achieve a different, you know, a higher rating. So that's interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Come visit. I mean, you can find us. We're, you know, listed on the Columbus City Schools website. Please come visit anytime. Feel free to come. My principal colleagues have reached out, and 3 of them over the last week, and mind you, Columbus City Schools has been in school for 2 weeks. So I've talked to 3 colleagues, and again, after 17 years of being an administrator, they called me and said, I can tell where they were last year. I was a principal in a typical pre-K through 5 building. I could walk into kindergarten classrooms and see who probably attended somewhere that had some quality to it. They were moving along, they were okay, they were ready for kindergarten. So just the simple fact that those 3 called me and texted me last week, I thought, you know what, we're okay. I sent some kids that were ready, 75 of them at least. I sent them out, they're ready for kindergarten. Now they're sitting in the classroom and the barriers aren't there. So, I mean, I think that's probably the best gift we can give.
Thank you, Candace. We can do this.
Right? We already did it. We're ready. Let's go.
That's
Let's
right.
do this, right? Okay.
Thank you, Candace, very much. Angel, it's good to see you again. Angel Rhodes is with us, and we're going to see what our sister cities in Ohio are doing. Dr. Rhodes completed her PhD at The Ohio State University with a focus on both clinical counseling and school counseling. She specialized in childhood development. Dr. Rhodes currently works in the governor's office, where she serves as Ohio's first Officer of Early Childhood Education and Development. In this role, she coordinates all state work for early childhood in the Ohio Department of Education. So we'll be knocking on her door quite a bit, even more so than we have in the past. She is the executive chair for the State Early Childhood Advisory Council and led the implementation of the $70 million Early Learning Challenge grant. Prior to her appointment to the governor's office, Dr. Rose was a professor and director of the School Counseling Graduate Program at the University of Dayton. Thank you, Angel, for making time for us this morning, and we look forward to your presentation.
Happy to be here. First of all, one thing, I oversee everything we do, not just in the Ohio Department of Education, but the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, Health, Mental Health and Addiction Services, our Developmental Disabilities Program, and the Ohio Department of Education. So any of our state agencies that touch early childhood, I am the point person and the point of accountability now in that role. And Candace has definitely called me on a couple of occasions. No. No, really good questions, really important areas that need to be addressed, because it doesn't always go smoothly. And so absolutely understand that anybody in this room can contact me in the governor's office and say, I have an issue with something, and as Candace can attain, I will be on the phone with the folks saying, help me understand this, what's going wrong, I need you to make a phone call to such and such a person, and I will come in and sit in the meeting so we can figure this out. And that was created through the Early Learning Challenge Grant. So my position didn't exist before. We had all of our different agencies that were out there doing their own individualized work and nothing coming together. And when we talk about collaboration, and I heard several people up here talking about collaboration, we didn't have it at the state level. We had several beautiful silos sitting there doing their best, all to meet the needs, and basically we were just shooting off in different directions. So that in a nutshell is what I do. There is a manila folder that was passed out, and it has some of the key points that I'm going to talk about. What I think is important to understand is where we have been, where we are today as a state, and why what you are doing is so critical, and it is the right point in time to be doing this. If you see at the top there was this challenge grant that Ohio received, and it was $70 million. It was over 3 years worth of work, and it was set up so that Ohio could use these funds to not be in silos and to try to figure out how to work across agencies and to help our communities to do that. So when we think about the most basic thing, early learning and development standards for children, the Ohio Department of Health had a set, mental health had a set, ODE had a set, JFS had a set, and they were very different. Now, can you imagine as a parent, you're hearing from your pediatrician, you're hearing from your own teachers, and then the state has 4 different sets of early learning and development standards? It was really the wild, wild west. So we pulled in significantly on all those areas. You can see on post-challenge grant, we've gone from about a $700 million a year annual budget to an $862 million a year annual budget. And that's across all agencies. That's not just preschool, it's not just kindergarten, it's not just our health or mental health. And so you can see there's several pieces that are on there that we do now. This gives us a good foundation for our local groups, our local cities, our local initiatives to begin doing very important work of lifting children up and making sure that we have our kids being ready for kindergarten. You can see there also, the next one that I have on the list is what is quality, and you hear the 5-star rating system. Now, just a quick show of hands, how many people understand what the 5-star rating system is? Okay, see, that's a problem. We have done research, and what we learned is that people think the 5-star rating system is like the 5-star restaurant rating system or the 5-star satisfaction system that you see on a HSN, a QVC, and Amazon. And so that's one of the things, that's not good. We don't want that. So we need to make sure that we're starting to educate folks on that. What the 5-star rating system is it tells you when you look at a child care provider or a preschool provider, what level of quality they are from 1-star to a 5-star. Now, I've had some people say, well, why would they put up a 1-star or a 2-star? Because that's really a good start. And that shows that the people that are in there know that quality is important and they are wanting to get in and work up to that 5-star rating. It's a process. And so you know that you have the right mindset of the folks that are in there providing those services to the children. And then you see that next one. Those are just some of the basic pieces that are part of what goes into something that is called high quality, which is your 3, your 4, your 5-star rating system. And I think if we start breaking down what the star rating system is into these much more understandable chunks, instead of the big piece of paper that's on my wall in like 4-point font and it has what goes into each rating, I think if we can start talking about that, it's going to be a lot more helpful. Some of the questions I get from folks in Columbus is, what are the other cities doing right now? So what is a Cleveland, a Cincinnati? When I think of the cities that are similar here, I'm thinking Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, Canton. Those are mostly the ones that have similar types of what I call infrastructure within the city. And so each city has followed a different path, and each city is in a different area of success. Some are struggling a little, and they're still trying to get their feet under them. Some have made miraculous steps forward in one area, and they're still struggling a little bit in other areas. If we think about Canton, Canton is our smallest urban in the state of Ohio. And when I have people from other states ask me, what city is getting it the best, right? I look at Canton because they have moved their systems in very good ways and they are seeing great outcomes for children. When we think about what they are doing, they focus birth to kindergarten entry. Not just preschool, but they look at everything we're doing for children from the time they're born and we're working with them, or whether families are working with them, until those children are entering kindergarten. That's a little different from some of the others that you'll hear me say. And when we think about their funding, they're basically local philanthropic dollars that are going on top of our state dollars and their local JFS dollars that are in there. Dayton started out as 2 organizations. Dayton started out as a birth to 5 that really actually focused on preschool, and then they had a kindergarten to 12th grade. And so they had these 2 different approaches, and what they realized is that it doesn't make sense to bifurcate what you are doing between what we do early childhood and we know what is supposed to take place in the K through 12 years. And so Dayton has recently in the last year pulled their 2 different organization approaches into one. So it is what they call a true cradle to career organization. And so we're looking at early childhood and making sure that that transitions well and works up. Cincinnati, they have Thrive by 5, and it is a birth to age 5 focus. However, Cincinnati has just passed a levy for preschool in the last year, and so they're really doubling down on those preschool years and getting the preschool services out. And then we have Cleveland, which many people have heard of their Pre-for-Cle, and they have been tremendously successful in getting the support, the private funding, the family organization around the preschool years for 4-year-olds, and they hope to get down to 3-year-olds. What we have seen in Cleveland is a little bit of a shift and a concern from the folks that are there, because it's preschool and those birth to 3 years are feeling a little left out. And so Cleveland is dealing with this: how do we make sure we're not just all focused on preschool, and that we do look at the full spectrum of the years that are in there? You can see there's several keys to success that I have seen across these different states. And what I think is great is that Ohio is not out on a limb. We are not going in the wrong direction, because I absolutely see these same things going on in other states. So as part of my job, I also interact with Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Illinois, Indiana, California, Texas, Arizona, just a whole gamut of folks. And the states are talking with each other, and we're like, okay, what did you do? Did it work there? How do we look at it here? So that we don't just have individuality going on. All of the states are trying to learn from each other, just as you all are talking about learning from other communities. I think the biggest things that I am seeing in the areas where we're seeing big success, and you can kind of see it in my bullet points, is that there is a lead organization that is working on collective impact. In Canton, it's the Sisters of Charity. In Cleveland, it's Pre for Cle. Thrive by 5 when we go down to Cincinnati, and Earn to Learn in Dayton. So there's somebody that's not the boss. They're not the ones that are setting the agenda and telling people what to do, but they're convening people, and they're talking, and they're helping them to understand what maybe their role is in the system, so that they can get everybody working in the same direction. That's one of the big things. The also huge one is they agree on the goals. Everybody has sat down and they've looked at it and they've said, here's what we want to achieve. Data has to come in. And I think probably if I go by what I've heard across the presentation before, and I've heard what some of people referred back to Laura Justice. I didn't get to see Laura's presentation, but I know Laura well, and I think I probably know what she said. Is this communications strategy, because we have to teach families and communities about the importance of early childhood. I can't tell you to this day how many legislators and how many families that I talk to, and they say, well, that's just like babysitting before they go to school. No. This is school, this is education, this is getting these kiddos ready so that they are on a level playing field with children that have very different backgrounds and very different resources in their lives. So we have to understand, and it's I'm sure Laura was talking about, it's the brain development. It is the impact of trauma on that child's prefrontal cortex. It actually impacts how that brain works and what they're able to do. The executive functions are things that people are starting to talk about now. We have to have the community learning. And one of the interesting things I heard when I was up at at Canton, and Sisters for Charity was taking me around, and I was talking to several people, and Joni Close from Sisters of Charity had those people on message. It didn't matter who I went to. They spoke the language. They knew everything. They were able to really go into it, and that was a community that had been educated and pulled in. And so you can see there's several other pieces that are right down and along there, but it's just so critical, that family engagement portion.
Thank you, Angel. That perspective is invaluable. This context is everything they say, and that statewide context is going to be very helpful to us as we go forward. Thank you very much. John?
Okay. And the last member of our panel is Dr. Eric Carlock. Not bad, getting a little better maybe. Dr. Carlock
I'm
is...
starting to worry if I've been saying it wrong. Now I have to...
It's a Carolock, but...
Carolock.
I answer it always.
Yeah.
Just call me Eric from Action for Children.
All right, Eric from Action for Children. He's the CEO of Action for Children, and he's going to talk to us about the national perspective. Eric has worked to expand access to quality early childhood experience for all children in Central Ohio. Previously, Eric directed the efforts of Early Care and Education, the Early Care and Education Consortium, a Washington, D.C.-based national alliance of more than 8,000 learning programs providing care and education for nearly 1 million children across the United States. From 2001 to 2006, Eric led the National Child Care Information Center, the largest federal clearinghouse and technical assistance center focused on child care and early education for low-income families. Eric is now going to speak to us about some examples from other cities.
Thank you. So I was asked to summarize in 10 minutes what else is happening in the nation at the city level. And I think that's kind of impossible, especially since I'm also the guy between you and lunch. So I will try to keep brief. And I think instead of talking about any one particular city or a couple of cities, which would also belie my bias about which ones I think may be doing well in their context, and also my own experience, because I've worked in a couple of those settings, I think it's maybe better to think about some questions, some issues for you, for all of us to be grappling with as we work here locally. You know, I was struck both on this panel and before it reminded me of a comment Jane Leach made at the beginning of the morning. We have to be all in on this work. And that is so important. It takes all of us to move this issue forward. And our mayor's support is certainly helpful. It's crucial. You know, without strong leadership at the city level, municipal initiatives don't happen or they go awry of political influences. So I'm going to try and just give you some general comments, try and stick this to 5, although I don't have a PowerPoint, so I might get confused as I'm talking to you. One thing I would say is there is an urgency driving leadership at the city. I hear it in the mayor when he speaks very consistently about the importance of early learning. But I see it also around the country where cities are increasingly the places where the laboratories of democracy that states used to be referred to as, cities are increasingly the places where people are experimenting and figuring out new and innovative ways to do things. And some of that is because at the federal and even at the state level, our political leaders aren't moving us forward as fast or as far as we would like. And so cities are grappling with that and taking things on and moving them along in their own way. But some of it's also because at a local level, you can get everybody in the room. You can pull together a wide constituency from the Hilltop and create a Hilltop solution that, as the mayor said, can be a model for the rest of our city. You can get all in a bit easier, perhaps, than when you're looking at a statewide effort, corralling all of those silos, what an amazing thing over the last few years, or at a national level. The other thing that's important about the urgency of local initiatives is sort of a mantra that I try to remind myself of from time to time, and that's that children are raised in families, and families live in communities where poverty is persistent and equity is crucial. I think if you break each of those down, children live in families, they're raised principally by their parents and other caregivers, and those families have to exist, have to make things work in their community, which is right here in the Hilltop. Transportation, we have to talk about transportation. The lack of jobs and other opportunities, right? And those communities are beset by persistent poverty. This is an monkey we got to get off our backs. And early childhood education is, I think, the best route for doing that. And doing that will assure us of greater equity. Our country is racked by a multi-century history of inequity, and it's no better illustrated than if you look to our educational system and outcomes. We have a real challenge in producing the generation of the future coming out on an equal level, and early childhood offers the opportunity of being a great equalizer, along with free public education done well and done right. So fierce urgency of local efforts, I think, is a crucial point. When mayors or other local leaders look to early childhood, they have a bunch of questions to grapple with. And these, I think, are the questions rather than tell you this is what happened in Denver, I think are worth our discussing a bit. One question is, do you focus on all 2,000 days before a child from birth to school entry, there are about 2,000 days, do you focus on that entire range, birth to 5, or do you focus on just the last 300 days? And you might have good reasons for doing either one. We've talked a lot about the last 300 or so days, the pre-K year when you're 4 years old, and there's good reason to focus there. But in other cities, some folks are saying, no, let's try something broader. One of my favorite examples of that is in Providence, Rhode Island, a program called Providence Talks. You know, Laura's presentation demonstrated that if you aren't getting inputs, that brain isn't developing early on, and researchers have actually calculated that. They've been able to measure that in a low-income family, a child hears, over the first 3 years of their lives, 30 million fewer words than a middle or more affluent income family. And that means they have less verbal input, less opportunity to grow that, I don't know, was it prefrontal cortex? No, it's further in the back. Grow the brain the way it needs to be grown, as Laura, Dr. Justice shared with us. And so there's an opportunity in some cases, this example in Providence Talks, to focus on increasing the number of verbal interactions between a parent and a child, a caregiver and a child, in everyday settings, at the grocery store, at the bus stop. And I think these are tremendous opportunities that worked well in that environment. I don't know if they work here in Hilltop. A wider group has to figure that out. Others are looking more to the pre-K year, that last 300 set of days in that year, and with good reason for that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. In some cities, they take up the question, do we create a new program, or do we sort of launch a bully pulpit effort? That's some old-fashioned phrase about community leaders exhorting us to do great things. Do you encourage others to do something, or do you create a program? In Nashville, it sort of did both, but originally they started out by encouraging reading, giving away books through doctors' offices and schools and so forth, and increase the number of children having more books in their homes and being able to read. Harder to measure the long-term impacts of something like that, but it is a difference from creating a new program, which is likely to cost a little bit more money. Do you fund services that are already out there, but just not fully funded or not available in your neighborhood? Or do you create a new program, a new initiative that is detached from other and existing services? In most cases, cities have looked and said, we want to build off, we want to leverage the investments others are already making, we want to leverage the programs that are already out there. And that's what I also hear locally. When you get to those decisions, though, and you decide you're going to focus on the pre-K year and you're going to leverage the existing programs that are out there, then another set of questions pop in. Which children do you focus on? 3- and 4-year-olds, you heard Laura mention that, or just 4-year-olds? It can be more expensive to do 2 sets of years, or you can scale and make it less expensive or no more expensive. But the question about which ages is important, because remember, there's 2,000 days from birth to school entry, and we have to be thinking about the opportunities that are available in each one of those days. How do you determine who's eligible? Is there an income eligibility limit? 200% of poverty, 300? In one community, it goes all the way up with a sliding fee to 600% of the federal poverty level, which I think is something like $140,000 for a family of 4. And if you do have an income eligibility limit, are there ways to make your money go farther by having a targeted area, a neighborhood that you focus on first, a pilot like the model here that we're working on in Hilltop? Do you create something on its own or align to existing systems? Angel described the Step Up to Quality system that the state has sponsored to create a continuous path to quality improvement for individual programs. Is there a way to leverage that so that you're not defining a whole separate set of quality standards? Most cities have done something along those lines. If they have a state quality rating system like our Step Up system, they try to leverage that. If they want to make sure that not only do you use a curriculum, but there's an assessment of children, most cities do that, they try to use ones that are already in use in early childhood programs and well-researched, along with that well-researched curriculum, rather than create their own brand new assessment or checklist to be able to add another burden to a child care provider. They have to be thinking a bit about how you pay for it. There are lots of ways, and I think the political leadership in the community is going to help us with that. In some cities, it's an additional sales tax. There's in Denver, I think it's a 12-cent sales tax on every item purchased over $100. In others, it's a sin tax. At the state level, beer in one state, Arkansas, Philadelphia taxes pop to raise funds for early childhood. Property taxes, that's how we fund K-12. And in other cities, Seattle, there is a additional property tax that for, $10, $20, $30, $40, I don't actually know the exact number, I think it's about $40, each year on an average property, you are able to create the funds to do what it is you want to accomplish in the early childhood space. But those are all questions to sort through. There are some other common themes. One is convening people. So whatever the questions they're going to figure out, a group has to decide that. And really, that's beginning here with you. You are the decision makers of the first sort in this process. Now you know I've hit my time limit. So convening
wishing that Candace and I had done the same.
Should have set an alarm, sorry.
Convening stakeholders. You know, up in Cleveland, they brought together a group of 60 people all across the community who worked over 3 months to redesign their preschool initiative just about two years ago. So community involvement is crucial to make sure that the program works for you. There's often a public awareness component. You know, I would say, and you know, I'm partly funded by the state and partly funded by the county. You'll be hearing from them and other folks. I would say the greatest shortcoming of Step Up has been we have not, over now a 10-year period from its pilot, really broadcast about it. There's not been a public awareness campaign. There aren't PSAs that have been running. And so the demand that you would want parents and providers to have for it has been kind of dampened. So in other places, when they launch pre-K campaigns, they're thinking about that. Convince families that there's an incredible opportunity and also help them understand what they should be looking for. There should be we should be thinking where the children are. You know, a common question when these groups form at the city level around the country is what data is available, what do we know, where are the children already? If you think about that, you're more likely to design a program that meets the needs of the families. It doesn't mean you're going to fund them where they are right now. Another common element, the next to last of the common elements, is that they create standards. They may not be brand new. They may be aligned to something that already exists in the state, but they don't just give more money to do the same old thing. It's not a very smart idea politically, but also in terms of making sure there are outcomes and results. And so being able to make sure that you know where the children are and you are meeting the needs of families while requiring programs to do more is really crucial. Sometimes we think of school as something separate from childcare. For the first 2,000 years of life, a child learns no matter where it is, and the question is what opportunities we make available. Setting those standards where children are is a way of making sure every child has some improvement in the opportunities before them. And the last thing that is common, it's not uniform, we don't, you know, nationally cities haven't done as well on this as they should, is a focus on the workforce. You can't move this work forward without the people who do it. This is very labor-intensive work. You know, at the Linden Park Center, where they've done this awesome job of blending what we might call special needs and traditional development programming for children, there are staff ratios that govern that. In any program that's licensed, there are staff ratios that affect the amount of labor you have to have in the room, the teachers and their assistants to work with children. And since labor is the crucial thing in this, the quality of the workforce, we have to be thinking about what we do them. I wanted to scream preach when Laura talked about wages, absolutely crucial, but also how we revere and esteem these folks. Action for Children does professional development, among other things, in our community, and we had a graduation ceremony in July for one of the largest, nationally largest graduating classes of Child Development Associate recipients. And those individuals had invested a ton of time and effort in getting the certificate and the opportunity to celebrate that. We just don't do enough of that. So emphasizing the supports for the workforce, tuition assistance, other kinds of efforts is really crucial. I could go on. We could talk about a couple of cities, but I actually think the answers, you know, to quote a president, you know, we are the change we are seeking. You know, the answers are here and also elsewhere in the community. And I think if we focus ourselves on the right questions and are open to the information coming before us, we'll get to the right place.
Fantastic. Thank you, all three. All right, we ask you to take your seats and keep enjoying your lunch, and there's plenty of lunches back there. As you know, there's more than enough for take-home, so if you've got starving family members you'd like to help with, please feel free. So, now that everybody has a lunch, hopefully, we're about ready to get back to work. As we mentioned in the last panel, some themes have started to take shape very clearly, and from what we've heard, we can say that successful expansion programs are strategic, they focus on quality, they have qualified teachers, they advocate for equity of pay, they have high standards, they engage parents in the community and community engagement, and not least, they are appropriately funded. Now, let's switch gears a little and talk about health. Celebrate One, which Mayor Ginther referenced in his remarks, does some great work engaging parents and connecting them with resources. Is this something that we need for education? Let's welcome Alicia Leatherman, Director of Strategic Initiatives for Celebrate One, and Ernest Perry, the President and CEO of Hands On Central Ohio. Alicia, thank you for joining us. She currently serves as the Director of Strategic Initiatives for Celebrate One, Mayor Ginther's Collective Impact Initiative to reduce infant mortality. In this role, Alicia works with many community partners on the implementation of interventions to eliminate preventable sleep-related deaths, reduce prematurity, and help connect the disconnected. Prior to joining the mayor's office, Alicia served as Director of Infant Wellness at Nationwide Children's Hospital, where she provided staff leadership to the Ohio Better Birth Outcomes Collaborative. Before transitioning to the local level, Alicia spent 14 years working on state-level policy and programming for Ohio's early childhood system. She served as Deputy Director for Child Care at the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, Director of Governor Strickland's Early Childhood Cabinet, and the Executive Director of the Ohio Child Care Resource and Referral Association. We are very pleased to have such an expert with us. Alicia, we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Just to provide a little bit of context, I know you all have done a lot of talking about early childhood systems, which is, as the bio unfortunately says, I've spent a long time in that area and working at the state level on a lot of the issues that you're grappling with here today. And when a colleague came to me and said, do you know that Ohio is one of the worst states with infant mortality? I had no idea. And I'd been working at the state level and with the state agencies that Dr. Rhodes referenced. And I thought, God, I've been spending all this time developing these wonderful systems for babies and toddlers and preschoolers. And here we have all these babies and families that never get a chance to experience it. So it really challenged me to kind of shift my thinking and try to figure out how do we make sure that every baby has the healthiest right start, and then hopefully that those early childhood systems that are being developed and funded and strengthened just help to serve that child all the way through those early years. So I'm thrilled to be here. I also want to mention I'm going to give an overview of some of our work and some opportunities that I see. But my colleague, Raquel Fuentes, is on your work group and will be, and has been, and will be sitting with you guys side by side. She'll be a wonderful resource. So any way that we can be helpful as this conversation continues to evolve, we want to make sure that we are. So next slide. So I'm going to just provide a couple of slides just to give some context for where we are with our goals. And we've been fortunate that there's been a lot of clarity around what we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to accomplish. On one hand, on the other hand, it's very ambitious and scary as the years are continuing to move. So you can see that when Celebrate One was created, there's a 40% goal to reduce infant mortality across the community by 40%. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you've talked about some disparity issues, African American babies are 2.5 right now. It's more like 3.5 times more likely to not celebrate their first birthday than white babies, and that is just absolutely unacceptable in our community. So we want to reduce that racial disparity. You'll also notice, based on those goals, the goal is to get to a rate of 6 babies dying at their first birthday. And unfortunately, we don't want to say that we have a goal of any babies dying. We want that to be 0, but in reality, based on the causes of infant mortality, we have a goal of being at 6 babies. So you can see over the next 3 years how aggressively we have to reduce that infant mortality rate to hit the goal that the mayor set. Next slide. And I just want to show, we call, I don't know if the mayor said it this morning, but neighborhoods is how we are organizing our work, thinking about our work, focused on our work. And in the context of Celebrate One and the mayor's priorities and why we had a presenter talk about what's happening in Linden, why we're here in the Hilltop today, is the neighborhoods that you see up there, those 8 neighborhoods, are the opportunity neighborhoods, where we see the opportunity to create better systems, more alignment, put more resources together. And I did put a circle around where we are with the Hilltop. Because the numbers are very small when you start to break them down by neighborhood, we actually group years together so you can start to see the trends. So the first line is what was happening in 2010 to 14. And then, and the writing is very small. No, I'm sorry, 7 to 11, and then 12 to 16. So that bottom row, Celebrate One, was created in the fall of 14. So you can start to see that we're making some improvements in some of the neighborhoods, but still not at the pace that we need to. And so we're continuing to stay focused on the data from a neighborhood perspective. The box down below shows where we are, particularly with Hilltop. We had 5 infant deaths in 15, 6 in 16, and already through May we have 5 this year. And so the rate is associated with birth, so you also have to pay attention to the number of babies that are being born too that can impact that rate up and down. These are the strategies that Celebrate One is focused on. We have work happening in all of these. For today's discussion, I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. And a portion of what we're doing in the neighborhood, one of our programs, the Community Connectors, I'm going to focus on. And then also think about safe sleep practices and where we see some opportunities. That is a huge goal, and one of the areas that people consider in this fight low-hanging fruit, because the majority of infant sleep-related deaths are actually preventable. So it's an area that we're really, really focused on, because we think it can at least take a big sledgehammer to that infant mortality rate quickly. Next slide. So the strategy that I want to talk about from a neighborhood perspective is our Community Connector Core. So in 2015, Celebrate One in the city received funding from the United Health Foundation to begin to train residents to talk about infant mortality in those 8 neighborhoods. And in this picture, you see Tanya, who's on the left. She's one of our community connectors from our 2016 class. What we do when we recruit connectors is we identify an organization that can serve as a host to that connector, and then the connectors are actually residents of that neighborhood. They know the culture, they know where people hang out, they know what the schools are like, they know what people are talking about. And so we could never transport someone and put them in a neighborhood and get that same flavor and be as respectful and understanding about the culture in that neighborhood. So our community connectors, we're going to have 72 of them by the end of the grant. 2018, it's a 3-year grant, and we'll, in the next next week, we'll be posting applications. So our goal is to have, I think, 4 connectors on the Hilltop in this last year. So as you think about parents and families and people that come into your organizations, are there people that potentially could be good candidates who can go out and talk to parents about infant mortality and resources that they have available in their neighborhood? The role of the connector is really focused on the connection to families. They're not social workers, they're not case managers. Their goal is to build awareness about infant mortality, build awareness about some of the resources that we have, but then to make that connection to the organizations who are expert. In this slide, I'm just sharing a little bit of context of our work around the connectors in our neighborhood work. So we have 11 organizations, as I mentioned. The second bullet gives you a sense of how many women the connectors are touching. We gather information about those connections that they're making, the topics that they're covering with those with the families or with the women. And while pregnant women is our primary target, we also are focused on finding women of childbearing age because we also want to talk about unintended pregnancies and planning to be a parent and planning to be healthy before you have a baby. So you can see the numbers, 5,100 women we have connected with them so far this year. So our opportunity to really get different messages out and promote the importance of early learning, to talk about the star ratings and step up to quality, we have some opportunities, I think, to build some bridges. The topics that our connectors have been focused on that have bubbled from the residents: safe sleep, crib distribution, step 1, which is our community number for connecting women to prenatal care. We have seen an increase in the percentage of women that are getting into prenatal care earlier, and we think it's because we have a very easy one way to access information about a lot of different providers in a neighborhood. Emergency food and WIC. Those are the topics that they've talked most about this year. Another thing in the neighborhood, you can see the Moms to Be logo. When a year and a half ago, Moms to Be was in 4 communities. They are now moving into all 8 of the opportunity neighborhoods, and I think Hilltop's location is opening on the 19th. So lots of head nods. So hopefully you all will be at the open house and be promoting this service. Really is a way for women to connect to each other. It's a support group. It definitely focuses on evidence-based, important issues, but at the core, it's women coming together, eating together, talking about their pregnancies, talking about resources, and really is one of those big goals around connecting the disconnected. And then our colleagues at Hands On, which Ernest will, I think, talk a little bit about. We thought it was really important. I don't know how many of you have binders with organizations where you have a list of, here are all the food pantries in my community, here are all the lists of the child care providers, here are all the places where you can get diapers. We know those numbers change. Instead of you, and you all updating those and going through your list, we have Ernest and Hands On. And so our connectors, when they're working with moms, instead of knowing all of that information up to date, who has spaces, who doesn't, who can do this, who can't, we have a referral specialist at Hands On where you can call that referral specialist directly and she'll help navigate that for you. So we hope it gives people a chance to really spend more face time with moms instead of spending that time looking things up and trying to find things. So these are some opportunities that potentially we can explore or think about how we create a bigger bridge from those babies that I talked about when I learned that there were these babies not celebrating their first birthday, and I wanted to shift my attention from the 3- and 4-year-old conversation down. How can we think about doing that at the neighborhood level? So from a Celebrate One perspective, how can Celebrate One support the work that you're doing? You know, how can we have our partners and our community connectors talk about early care and education, the importance of it, who's doing it? You know, there are lots of, in just the one panel that I heard, you know, we have a lot of challenges. Everyone's not called the same thing. Everyone doesn't look the same, every provider. We have homes, we have centers, we have people that are in strip malls, we have people that are in school buildings. At the end of the day, at the neighborhood level, those are neighbors. Those are people who are being employed at those early care and education programs. There are self-employed women in a lot of cases that have started these businesses. So we also want to think about, from a neighborhood standpoint, if all those went away, what does it mean for the people that have jobs in those neighborhoods? So how can we really talk about the importance of the supply that's out there, the importance to have your child in an early learning setting? And then it's our job to think about how we support those providers with improving their quality. But really, how can our connectors and our partners be a voice for that message? How can we talk about the star ratings? I fortunately drive down from my work to my daughter's school to my house, straight down Livingston. And if you drive down Livingston, you will see all over the place Step Up to Quality banners on schools, in strip malls, all over the place. I feel like, you know, the momentum, how we think about it, how we make sure that there's this thread that weaves through the neighborhoods where residents and neighbors are starting to talk about, like, what is that and how is that different than what I saw down the street? What are the activities that step up, that based on the step 1 requirements under community engagement, are there things that we're doing in Celebrate One that we can partner with you on meeting that criteria in Step Up to Quality? So I listed a couple of ideas. One of our goals is to have baby showers in every community to find pregnant women. We also want to have birthday parties in every neighborhood. So how can we partner on those events so that the early care and education community has a chance to talk about the importance of early care and education and the continuum at those events? And then locating children. We know that most families don't have one child. So if they're pregnant and it's not their first baby and they have other children in the home, how can we make sure that we're talking about the importance of finding a program for that family? Then on the flip side, how can ECE support Celebrate One? Promoting services like Moms to Be, like home visiting. We unfortunately in our community have a home visiting system that is underutilized. Out of all the large urbans, we are getting the least amount of resources from the state. That's a problem. We need to fix that. We have people who can walk alongside pregnant women and their families during their pregnancy. And maybe it's the way we talk about it. Maybe they should be called mentors, pregnancy mentors, family mentors. We should change the name. We should change the language. But if you in early care and education don't have the ability to provide that kind of support, where in the neighborhood you have someone who's following that person, talking to that person about being a parent, this is a great partnership that you can promote. It helps us to get more women in, and hopefully it helps that family be more functional, show up more to early care and education, and provide some consistency. Hosting conversations at your location about resources that are available through Celebrate One. That certainly seems like one of the criteria in Step Up to Quality is bringing your families in, hosting conversations. How can we partner on that? And a very easy thing is the connectors that are located, let's take Hilltop, could they come every Monday morning, every Tuesday morning, and just be at your program meeting with families as they're coming and going, picking up, dropping off, if you have a program where the families are bringing the kids in. So just a couple of ideas. The next topic is safe sleep. As I mentioned, real ambitious goal, really focused on it. The next slide is a data brief that will be a little bit hard to see, but I'll try to summarize it. This shows by month the number of sleep-related deaths we have had in our community. And what we're really excited about is this year so far, we have 50% fewer safe sleep-related deaths than we did the year before. So we're really making progress. Part of our strategies are safe sleep ambassador trainings, and really making sure that people all over, not just parents, but people who influence that family. Child care providers influence the family. They look to teachers as experts. They look to family child care providers as experts. Grandmas, aunts, uncles, pastors, these are all people that influence that family. How do we send this safe sleep message out into the community? So a couple of things that we've done, we've educated. So every person who has a baby, regardless of whether it's your first or your 10th baby, you cannot leave the hospital without turning on a safe sleep video that's played in all of our birth hospitals across the state, or across the city. So regardless of whether it's Mount Carmel or Ohio State, every new family sees this. It has shaken baby, breastfeeding, and safe sleep information in it. We also know, believe it or not, when this started, our hospitals weren't promoting during that time that the baby is in the hospital as strong safe sleep practices as we wanted. A lot of times there were things in the bassinet, there were blankets in the bassinet, and so the hospitals are really focused on modeling strong behaviors so that when the family leaves, they do what they're doing. We also have pack and plays that are available in the community, and we just launched, hopefully people have seen it, or if you haven't, go to our website, a new multimedia campaign that's Real Stories, Real Families. It features 2 parents in our community who have actually lost children due to unsafe sleep practices. So we hope that that message starts to flip from just an awareness of the ABCs to really changing your behavior and thinking about that. So how we can work together on this, providing families, so if you have an infant toddler provider or you have a 3 or 4-year-old who mom is pregnant or has a little baby, how can you ask, do you have a safe sleep setting at home? Can we make sure that you're connected, that you get cribs? Again, how can we identify activities in Step Up to Quality where we can meet that requirement? Coming and hosting a safe sleep ambassador training on your site could be one of the things that can meet that criteria. What can ECE do? Really taking a lot of responsibility for the fact that you are respected, early care and education are respected messengers. So how do we make sure that you are sharing the most up-to-date, best information with families? When babies come in those car seats asleep, it's an opportunity to talk to the family about not having the baby sleep in a car seat at home. What's the sleep setting at home? Because we want that baby alone in a crib and on their back. Pack and play distribution sites. If you wanted to offer pack and plays, you could become a partner with the Columbus Public Health Department. And then again, hosting ambassador training. This last slide just shows some information about what's available. You can also help to distribute information. Some of them are around smoking cessation, the impact of smoking in your home, whether you're pregnant or whether your baby is under 1, or we know there's impact, again, 0 to 5 if there's smoking in the home. On the far right side, those are kiosks that we have across the community. On the Hilltop, we have 3 locations, the Van Buren Shelter, JFS, and Primary One on Broad Street, that all have those kiosks where we pack them filled with information that families may need around the resources that we have available through Celebrate One.
You've done a masterful job of capturing a lot of information in a condensed presentation, and it's masterful on many levels. And one is you obviated all my questions by answering them in your presentation, except for one, and that is, and I know you can answer this in 25 words or less, if you were this task force and you were advising the mayor on taking the lessons learned through Celebrate One and all the connections you've already built and the things you've done to connect people, to make awareness go up, we can't do everything at once. We'll have to sequence what we do, prioritize what we do, and walk before we can run. Is there 1 or 2 first steps in what you've presented that ought to be the highest priorities?
Well, I think promoting Step Up to Quality in a way, because that is something that is universal across all provider types. So the names, the buildings, the teachers, things are different, but that unites us. I also think finding simple ways to talk about why early care and education is important, similar to home visiting. The day-to-day parent, the whole brain development, while it's important for people who make decisions about money to understand what's happening with that baby, parents are trying to figure out, how is this going to make my life easier? If I don't have to get up and take my child somewhere, how do we motivate people to understand that this is just part of what happens when kindergarten happens? Parents are running to the door. They're figuring it out. They're excited about school. We have to move that language and that expectation down.
Thank you so much.
Next, we're going to hear from Ernest Perry and build on the idea of connecting to resources, which is a big part of what we need to consider. Ernest is president and CEO of Hands On Central Ohio, Ohio's largest information and referral and community data insights organization. And I can speak from personal experience. We use you every day at the library, maybe every hour. It's a great resource. Before returning home to Columbus to lead Hands On Central Ohio, in 2013, Ernest served as Executive Director of Promise Neighborhoods of the Lehigh Valley, which is in the greater Philadelphia and greater New York City area, which was named a White House Best Practice for Accountable Partnerships in 2011. There, he led several teams that developed strategies for improving the success of children and families in a growing and diverse region. Ernest, we're excited to hear from you.
Thank you. And I'm glad that Alicia covered our partnership with Celebrate One, because I'm actually here to talk about the case in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and not my current work at Hands On. but I think it's really relevant to why I came back to Columbus and do the work that I do today. I grew up in Linden, in North Linden. I was fortunate enough to go to preschool at age 3. I'm a Head Start kid. And so the lessons that I learned doing work in Lehigh Valley and also with the Strive Partnership and Early Learning in Cincinnati really taught me how important it is to try to figure out how to do something really important in my home community. So I'm honored to be here with you today, the folks who are on the ground doing the work. I don't have a presentation. I'm going to go low tech, but we'll start by playing Name That Tune, and I can't sing, so I'll speak it to you. And here are the lyrics. We're all living in Allentown, and they're closing all the factories down. Out in Bethlehem, they're killing time, filling out forms, standing in line. We're waiting here in Allentown for the Pennsylvania we never found, for the promises our teachers gave, if we worked hard, if we behaved. So the graduations hang on the wall, but they never really helped us at all. Billy Joel, Allentown, 1982. He wrote that song and really captured what was going on at the time in that community and put to words the feeling of an entire region of folks that for a generation had completely lost hope. And that's the Allentown that we worked on engaging parents around early learning in. What made this possible was in 2009, Pennsylvania created a neighborhood improvement zone in downtown Allentown. And it was really about creating tax incentives to develop the downtown commercial district and revitalize the waterfront west of the Lehigh River, which may sound familiar to you now. If you look at what happens downtown and in Franklinton, I think there are a lot of synergies there. And so that development really was a catalyst for restoring energy in the community, but it was really focused on commercial development, retail, housing, job creation, economic stimulus. And so we asked the question at the time, what about the people who have lived here for the last generation? What about the new and emerging American communities that are migrating to this part of the country? Allentown is a bedroom community for New York City. There are a lot of folks who just get priced out of the city who live in Allentown and drive 45 minutes to an hour to work every day, spend all day in New York, and then drive back home because they can afford to have an apartment at $1,700 a month, with 2 bedrooms. And so we really put together a partnership that brought together the business leaders, the community leaders, elected officials, school leaders, and most importantly, residents to figure out how to ensure that the folks who lived in the neighborhoods adjacent to the economic investment would have a chance to really participate in the new Allentown that was being created. Fundamentally, it was about economic growth and prosperity. And the people and the parents and families who lived in that community wanted their kids to have a chance to recapture a bit of the dream that they had when they first went to Allentown, thinking that they could still find a good job with a 8th grade education in the steel factory, okay? And so that was really our goal. And our entire engagement strategy was built on pulling people into conversations and understanding how this new Allentown would be an inclusive Allentown. We focused on a small neighborhood that was right next to what the Arena District would become. It was a 9-block area. I'll give you a little bit of the demographics on that. There were 5,000 residents, 1,200 kids enrolled in the public school district lived in that 9-block area, highly diverse. The district was 70% Latino, largely Puerto Rican and Dominican. 70% of the kids entering into kindergarten, if they went to kindergarten, never went to preschool at all. And in Pennsylvania, I think the mandatory start age for school was like 6 or 7 years old. I mean, it's still based on a farm calendar. So you had kids who didn't show up to school until they were in like the 2nd grade. And so a lot of those kids had never been to preschool. And the dropout rate for the school district reflected that. I mean, there's a direct correlation, as I'm sure you know, between participation in quality early learning and high school graduation. So you had a 70% non-participation rate in preschool and a 70% non-graduation rate in high school. I mean, it was really, really obvious. And so this was the world that we took on as being our challenge. And I think we were able to do some really effective things to help raise the level of engagement with families that resulted in more children getting engaged in early learning at a quality level. And now Allentown is the fastest growing city in Pennsylvania today. I mean, they've had over $1 billion in economic investment going over the last 10 years. It's a case study in urban renewal. And in large part, I think the work that we were able to do with this community was linked to that in sustainable ways, and we've seen that energy grow. So this first 9 blocks that we worked with that was recognized as the best practice has now expanded and has a replication project in Bethlehem and Easton. So the entire region now, which is over 1 million people, are engaged in this idea of how important it is to pull in parents and families and young children and have comprehensive growth strategies for economics and people. And so I think there are a lot of lessons that we took from that, and I'm sure I think we'll get a chance to talk about some of those.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what strategies you used for parent engagement or resident engagement in that process, particularly with people in poverty.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned some of the poverty rates there. Allentown, I think, was about 27 to 30% high poverty, which is very similar to this part of the city. The west side of the city has the highest poverty rate in Columbus. In some pockets, I think it's as high as 35, 36, 37%. And so, there are a number of strategies that we use to engage people. And one of the things that we did was really recognize that you can't serve or engage families in neighborhoods, particularly neighborhoods that are high poverty, from a distance. Like, you really got to be in a relationship with those communities. And so one of the first things that we actually did was we opened up and carried out all of our work from a storefront right in the heart of the neighborhood. I mean, people saw us there every day. Our doors were always open. We encouraged families to come in anytime they wanted. We created play spaces so that they could bring their families and interact normally with their kids, and gave us a chance to really develop meaningful and authentic relationships, and give them a chance to really understand that there was a true commitment to being a part of this community and not doing to the community, but really trying to figure out how to do in partnership. And doing in partnership often means not doing anything at all, just getting out the way. And so we had to really be present. We had to do that consistently, and we had to be open and authentic. We also did a lot to reach out directly to families in their homes. I think that's another thing. I mentioned the diversity of this community. There are a large number of first-generation Americans who came from different parts of the world. I think there were over 5 countries represented in the neighborhood, spoke a lot of different languages, and many different assumptions and expectations about how they encountered not only this particular community, but the United States as a whole. And so part of developing trust and understanding that there are some real cultural barriers to pulling people out was actually reaching out to them first. We spent 6 years getting the engagement project wrong. And we got it wrong because we built the engagement project based on the things that made sense to us. And I think that's a real persistent trend across a lot of organizations and efforts that work with people in low-income communities, is that we bring the assumptions of the professionals and we build the stuff that's convenient for us. And we did that for 6 years. We had this great idea to create a parent academy, because everybody does parent academies. And we put the parent academy in this really nice facility that was, I think, 2 buses away, and housed at the region's premier early learning center. It was a fabulous place, great reputation. And for 3 years, we graduated 2 families in 3 years. 2 families in 3 years. And so, part of the reason was that the families had really big concerns about safety in the neighborhoods. And so Allentown has a huge gang problem. It's right on the corridor between New York and the rest of the world. And so there's a huge drug problem through there, a huge gang problem. And so families were concerned about safety. And the parent academy classes were in the evening, and no one came out of their homes after they got home from school and work. And on Fridays, they would go in the house and wouldn't come out again until Monday. So part of the location and kind of structure and timing of the Parent Academy made it a failure. It was also tied to places that, for whatever reasons, created a lot of distrust. The families had very high respect for the traditional school building. They didn't trust anything outside of that. They trusted school, they trusted their faith community, and so anything outside of that, they didn't trust.
Ernest, can I butt in with a follow-up question?
Sure.
What was at play, what was at work that kept the light bulb from going off for 6 years as opposed to 3 years or 4 years or 2 years? I mean, 6 years is a long time.
I think we failed to really talk to the families. And I think that's the other part of the engagement that really changed the way that we worked, is that we created a parent advisory committee. And we really allowed them to not only be present and representative, but to have a true leadership voice in the development of the work and engagement in that community. And out of that conversation, that Parent Academy evolved to become a home visiting effort where we created opportunity for any family living in this neighborhood to have access to home visiting. And the home visiting combined the best practices from things like nurse-family partnership, but also early Head Start and parent as teachers. And so we went into a comprehensive model where we looked at child health, cognitive, and other development, gave parents tools to assess their kids, taught them how to teach their kids early literacy strategies. And that all came out of the conversation that we had with the Parent Advisory Committee. And they even came up with the name for the academy. You know, they said, in the places that we're from in Puerto Rico, school is school, right? We don't have preschool. We don't have half-day. You're either at school or you're playing. And so they looked at a half-day preschool model, or they looked at anything that was a daycare as being play. And play is optional. And so they said, you know, what we call this stuff that we do with our kids when we're teaching them, we call it Little School. So we branded our home visitation initiative Little School. And it took off. It was full capacity. And that's the way that we started to pull families into a different kind of a conversation about the importance of high quality early learning. And we actually used the Little School home visiting model as a bridge to eventually move more families into high quality center-based environments. But that was a 2-year bridge.
Thank you. Those are critical. The experience you're sharing is critical, I think, for us to keep in mind. I mean, I can think of my own experience and have been guilty of trying to craft a program for somebody else's benefit without understanding them and having a relationship with them and really knowing what they need and want. So we're a little bit over time, but I want to ask one quick question. And it's off the subject of Allentown. With 211, you have a case management system, and that kind of goes to the idea of a 0 to 1 pathway for people. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or what you might recommend in that kind of either one of you really?
Sure. I'll speak a little about what we're doing with 211 right now. We're actually really connected to this community in particular. I looked at our numbers just before I came over here, and on average, we're in at least one conversation with every household on the Hilltop every year. And if I look at the households below poverty level, we're probably in at least 3 conversations with each household. So we already have a really strong presence on the Hilltop. I think our relationship is really good and in a place where we have an opportunity to think about how do we focus those conversations and broaden that relationship to encompass particular emphasis on a 0 to 5 pathway. And those are things that we're talking about internally right now. We're also seeing the questions that come from this community around Head Start and early learning are increasing this year. I mean, we're seeing probably 2 to 3 times as many questions about early learning and Head Start, which could actually reflect some awareness that you've been raising already about the issue. You know, people hear things, they learn more about it, they want to ask more questions and get more information. And so we're actually seeing an uptick in that conversation. And we're in a really great position, I think, to link people to the types of resources, not only to support what they do, to get connected and learn about those opportunities in the 0 to 5 space, but all the things that go around that to ensure that families are stable. You know, we know that's the stuff that often undermines the progress of kids. It's not necessarily what happens in the school or in the learning center. It's when people don't have stable homes, they don't have enough food to eat, they don't have a bed to sleep on. You know, I remember that stuff that just gets in the way of learning. You know, one of the things that we did in Allentown is we had a mobile health clinic and a mobile dental van because the kids just didn't go to the dentist, and that caused the highest number of absences in the school building. School-age kids with rotten teeth. They couldn't go to school, they couldn't concentrate, they had to go to the emergency room for emergency extractions. I mean, it completely undermined the learning process. So all those, you know, kind of non-academic social determinant things that happen, that's what we're really good at doing at hands-on, and that's the kind of support that we can offer to a 0 to 5 pathway project.
Thank you both. This has been very interesting, Alicia and Ernest. I really appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
Yep. So as we move on to the next panel, don't forget to jot down your notes, questions for later this afternoon. And I know this has got my head processing and thinking. Settled in, I just wanted to summarize a few points that I heard. The importance of engaging parents and helping them navigate resources is clearly important and critical, not only to their health and wellness, but for their education and development of their children. I think it's possible that we should look at and think about a comprehensive multi-system 0 to 5 pipeline. It's something we need in the community, and I think it's one of the things we'll want to ask ourselves is what role could we play in that? What role could our recommendations play in that? So, now our next speaker. I'd like to introduce Damika Withers. Damika is extremely invested in families and childcare. She was born and raised in Youngstown, Ohio, and is a proud alumnus of Kent State University. She has 16 years of public service experience working in Geauga, Mahoning, Cuyahoga counties as a case manager and eligibility specialist. She's been with Franklin County for the past 7 years as a case manager supervisor, and is now the administrative officer of child care. Writing since she was 9 years old, she is the author of numerous poems, stories, and articles for various magazines, including Lifeway Christian Store, U Bible Study Book. She loves healthy eating and exercise, a wife to husband Rocky of 6 years, and a blended mom of 4 children. Welcome, Damika. Damika has a presentation for us, I believe.
So I'm here today to talk about publicly funded childcare, and just by a show of hands, because a lot of what I was going to speak about was how childcare is funded right now in the state of Ohio and step up to quality. So by a show of hands, how many people are familiar with publicly funded childcare? Okay, so a little bit. Okay, so this works. We'll go forward. So we're all here to learn together. If you want to move to the next slide. So my department is, these are what my department is made of. Kelly Merriman, who's in the audience today, is the Deputy Director of the Child Care Department at Job and Family Services. We have a provider outreach service area, and that area is designated to particular child care providers who serve a large number of PFCC families. So we have child care case managers who are designated to work on those applications, have that communication with our child care providers in that area. We have an initial application area who is constantly processing our applications for those who are interested in applying for publicly funded child care who currently do not have it, and 2 ongoing areas whose applications are being processed for those who currently have child care. We also have our licensing department. Our licensing specialists go out to monitor health and safety and compliance for all of our home child care providers right now in Franklin County. So that's an overview of what we do. So Ohio Department of Job and Family Services has developed a program that will covers costs of the child care for the children of eligible caretakers who are either working or in school, and we call that a qualified activity. So for parents who need to go to school, who need to go to work, who are part of a training program, many of the parents that you're serving who needs quality child care, and I just got a job today, I need child care today. And so those are the individuals who can apply for child care in order to receive this publicly funded child care service. This service is offered to children under the age of 13 or up to the age of 18 whose families have children with disabilities. Recipients of publicly funded child care may have a monthly copayment. That copayment is determined by their family size and their gross monthly income. Currently, we have 12,615 open cases in Franklin County. We are one of the largest counties, as you well know, in the state of Ohio. Don't panic. That doesn't mean that our case managers are constantly touching these 12,000 cases, but we are busy. We are a busy department. It's important for us to be able to provide services that are quick, that are accurate, that we are being able to communicate with. A lot of times, we've been spent a lot of times out in the community, and it's like, okay, yes, Job and Family Services is here. I have a mouthful to share with you. And that's okay. We want to hear it. We spent the last 2 years building partnerships with our child care providers, building partnerships in the community to be able to have an understanding on what it is that you need, what it is, how can we best serve you. It may not be written well for every program or every service that you want to provide, and if that's the case, let's be able to find something else that will work well with you. So that's what we've been spending our time to do with all of our 12,000 cases and providers who are serving those cases. To apply as an initial applicant to receive the PFCC eligibility, you must meet the federal poverty level of at or below 130%. To keep your publicly funded child care benefit, you must meet or be at below the federal poverty level of 300%. As you notice, there is a big disparity between the 130 to the 300%, right? So you would think that individuals who have this benefit work to maintain this benefit. And you would think that those who have it want to keep it, that they communicate with us in order to do so. That's not the case. We only receive about 65% return rate on our redetermination applications in order to keep their publicly funded child care. That's a problem for us. It's a problem because once they lose their eligibility, as you can see, they go back down to 130%. It's very difficult for them to regain that eligibility. So that's why it's important that we at Job and Family Services have partnered with providers and community organizations such as yourself to have this conversation with them, communicate with us, let us know what's going on in the homes, because it doesn't always mean that you're going to lose your child care eligibility. To shift our focus to our child care providers, there are currently 1,285 total child care providers who accept publicly funded child care. That number includes our family home child care providers, our child care centers, day camps, before and after care latchkey services. At the county level, we don't determine how much the providers are paid. The payment rates are determined by Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. The payment rates are paid by Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, depending on the age of the child and the utilization of the publicly funded child care. To put some things into perspective, there are 22,226 children from the age of 4 weeks old to 6 that are being served by publicly funded child care providers right now in Franklin County. That's a large number of children out here who needs care. Throughout today, I've heard a lot of conversation about step up to quality and what that means. And some people have spoke about that today, so I won't bore you with going over those details, but I will just stress on the priority of the significance of step up to quality and the conversation that everyone, and I will echo what the conversation has been throughout today, is a conversation about having quality care and what does that mean. We are serving individuals who, I said earlier, need immediate service because I have an immediate job or I have an immediate training program. I have an opportunity right now to better my family or order to just get food on the table for the next day. So how do we take that to a step further? How do we say, that's great, now you have these services, have you been looking for a provider who's offering quality care? And what does that mean? You can move over to the next slide, I won't talk about. So we talked earlier today also about what the star rating system looks like. We discussed already that ODJFS is providing the payment rates, and this is what the star ratings are. There's 5 of them. So they already receive a payment rate, just a basic payment rate, but if a provider is a 1-star up to a 5-star, the percentages shown here increases their payment rate. This is important because by 2020, all child care providers who are currently receiving payments out of publicly funded child care must be star rated. If they're not, they will lose their publicly funded child care funding at this point. The Hilltop alone, there are 31 child care providers. 26 of them right now are not rated providers. So let's talk about ratings and what's happening now and who's being served. Currently, there are 286 star-rated child care providers in Franklin County. That is a low number compared to the 1,285 providers we have in Franklin County. 960 child care centers, that's only 24% of those 960 centers, camps, or latchkey programs that are currently rated. Only 16% of family home child care providers are currently rated. There are currently 15,602 children from the age of 4 weeks to 6 years old right now who are not in rated programs. 930 children in the Hilltop who are not in rated programs. That is $2.2 million being paid out by PFCC currently. Imagine today if that was the year 2020. So that's why it's important to continue to have these conversations with your parents. We are available at Franklin County Job and Family Services to discuss the importance of publicly funded child care, the importance of maintaining that benefit, the importance of being able to get a family on publicly funded child care quickly if they're able and eligible for that benefit, and then having a conversation about quality, having that conversation with that provider about what are you offering my child, how is my child becoming kindergarten ready right now, and shifting that mind change of parents to say, I need to be able to think as my child, as someone who's going to be a successful adult. I'm a parent, and that's always my mantra, and Kelly's laughing, but I said all the time, I'm raising adults. I'm not raising my child right now to be the best 5-year-old that she can be for the rest of her life. So it's important as we're reaching these parents and as we're reaching the providers in the community that we're having these conversations, because the closer we get to 2020, and I'm sure all of you know time moves quickly, these numbers are startling now. Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services, we've been doing in our plight against Step Up to Quality and getting that word out. If you haven't seen it already, we began a media campaign that started September 4th. That media campaign will show right now for a month, and it talks about, it's a campaign to the parents, and it's a campaign also to the providers on why it's important to become star rated, and having that conversation and building great provider and caretaker relationships. You may have also heard about, if you are or you know providers who are currently receiving publicly funded child care, receiving Head Start dollars, receiving services through early childhood education, that the state of Ohio has stated that if you are a child care provider who receives publicly funded child care and any other monies from other funding sources, the children that you are serving cannot receive those funding sources at one time. So what does that mean? Because I know it's they've deferred that for a year, and is planning again to start October 1st, which I have not yet heard anything from Ohio Department of Job and Family Services on that. But basically what that means is if you are a family child care provider or a child care center and you have children in your care that are receiving publicly funded child care, but you also receive funding from Head Start, that when that Head Start time slot begins, say it begins from 9 to 3, at that time, you cannot bill for publicly funded child care dollars. So if you open at 7, your parent drops off at 7. From 7 to 9, you are receiving publicly funded child care. From 9 to 3, that child is being paid under Head Start. From 3 to 6, that child is being paid under publicly funded child care. That's a lot, right? And that sounds like a simple, ideal way that it will work. We know with the parents that we're serving, it doesn't work that way. So how do providers monitor this? They monitor it by building systems on when does my parent swipe in and out? When does my parent do back swiping? When do I need to have a better communication with my parents about truly what's happening and why they have to do this? Working at the office and hearing from case managers and talking to families, a lot of times they're not aware of what's going on at their home providers or their centers, because child care administrators, they're working to take care of business. They're working to take care of the paperwork. They're working to be able to just get through that day to be able to keep these children safe. There's another level that needs to come into play, and even as parents, if you're parents in here, you want to be able to communicate with the people that's caring for your children, right? You want to be able to know on all levels. So that's a conversation we're having with providers to say, let them know, communicate, because it's only going to affect the providers and their funding. The state has deferred this. They haven't been monitoring this for a while. It is coming. It's here. It's not something that we currently can ignore. Will it be difficult to add these measures and monitors into your business? Yes, it will. However, it's something, if you want to continue to provide quality services, we've already given you the numbers of children who are currently receiving these services. It will be detrimental to the children to not build these systems to be able to provide that care. My information is here. I will be here if you want to call and to talk about how we at Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services can help your community agency or help you just have more of a conversation with the people that you are serving, because 9 times out of 10, we're serving the exact same families, that they have questions, they haven't been able to contact us, and we at Job and Family Services want to make ourselves accessible. We want to have those communications with community agencies such as yourself to be able to say, let us help you, and then in turn help us to be able to work towards one common goal.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. We've talked about this, we heard some of this at the community meeting, and but that's a very concise explanation, and I feel some things starting to come into focus in my mind, but also seeing some of the hurdles that there might be on a institution level for the providers. I guess the question I have for you, the first question is, as far as this deadline, and we are a group that are going to give some recommendations to the city. What would you recommend, we recommend, or think about in terms of how to assist, or what resources do places have to get from now to 2020 and achieve at least 1 star?
So right now, Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services has partnered with Action for Children. I think Eric spoke earlier about the professional development that they do with their child care providers. And the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services is trying to become more on the forefront of talking about what does it take for each step. What is it that I have to do, and trying to put a cost behind that. So I think in the soon near future, you'll hear more of that conversation. Reaching out to your resource and referral agency, like Action for Children, earlychildhoodohio.org has resources on that website to be able to break down what it takes for each step. The deadline isn't going to go away, so that is not a recommendation I would say, make this go away. No, it's here, so what do we need to do to prepare for what's here? How do we make things work? We can continually fight against what we don't want to see and don't want to do to change, and things are difficult. I get that, but we also have the resources and the wherewithal to handle those difficulties and reaching out and see what there is available. And right now, Action for Children does have the tools to make that happen.
So one of the ideas that's floated around in this group is the idea of the need for a mentor or somebody to help organizations walk through the process, kind of what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Are you confident that that's already in place and we don't really need to think about that, or is that something that could be helped out at a local level, city level?
Yes, I'm confident that's in place. Where my hesitation lies is the more that the information gets out there, like with the media campaign, having things like this happen. If I'm a mentor, I can only focus and service that quality mentoring to one person so long. So when you add more people who are interested in Step Up to Quality and getting that information out, do we have enough mentors to be able to service everyone else? So is there training programs that groups such as this can take to say, okay, I've been mentored, let me be a mentor to someone else and take that on. Let me build sub-organizations or communities to say, this is what I've done and this is what has worked well. We found that with our home child care providers, they've built pockets of just supporting each other with resources, with information, letting them know, hey, I'm going to this seminar, I'm going to go and talk to this organization to be able to provide this. Not one organization can do it all. And I think today is a great example of that. We all need each other. It's about communicating and figuring out really what those needs are and where that best fits. Because as we move closer to 2020, it's going to be more difficult for even a mentor to serve in the way that they should.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then I wanted to ask a question about the funding. Obviously, that's complex, and there are reasons behind the different streams and probably legislative reasons why you can't braid and that kind of thing. But as a group that's trying to wrap its head around that and maybe figure out how we or the city, through a recommendation of ours, could help help that situation or grease the flow, are there things that come to mind for you that we should think about?
Well, there's not one big business process to say this is black and white and these are the A1 and to Z2 steps, right? Because every provider and every organization isn't built the same. So what we've done, because we can't control the requirement, we can only work with the requirement. What we've done at Franklin County is brought providers in. We've gone out to child care providers to help build business practices on what it looks like in your organization. How many PFCC families are you serving? based on how many PFCC families are you serving, what steps and processes have you put into your business to help monitor that? What is the best way to communicate to your families? You have to be able to monitor the funding, streamline how things are coming in. What is going to be best for your organization to maintain, or are there things that maybe I need to give up? And that looks different for every provider, looks different for every organization. So it's really taking the time to figure out, how do I make this work best and well for my organization or my provider. So we have no problem with having those conversations and coming out and see if there's anything that we can do to support that information. I would recommend that if it is causing barriers or challenges in your center or your home, that you contact Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and to get some clear understanding on how that looks like for you in the future.
And if I'm understanding correctly, this is just, that's one stream of funding, but is that typically not enough to get a child in like a preschool, for example?
The funding?
Yeah, either,
No.
yeah, like the state funding. We've heard a little bit about that at
Yes.
the community meeting.
Sometimes not. When you were talking about having to layer the funding, and now take, for example, I have this 4-year-old when I'm receiving full-time payment right now, but now that I have to layer my funding and take that 4-year-old from a full-time, but now to a part-time, that kind of messes up my funding stream in order on how I'm going to be able to provide the services I need to my provider. And for that child. So that could eventually will eventually trickle down to the families, depending on how they're serving and what they can do to serve that children. And that's why I say, because it's not a cookie cutter view. You have to really figure out, how is it going to best work for my facility.
So we should still be looking at other funding options.
I believe so. That one funding source can give you everything that you need. We're all here together. So, and that all of us are working together in order to provide one service to multiple families. We all have one goal. So you're not going to get everything that you need out of one funding source.
As I get up the learning curve here, I'm getting more and more scared about 2020. That deadline's right around the corner, as you and others have vividly illustrated for us. If providers are not able to or don't register by 2020, what are the chances that this deadline might be relaxed so we don't have wholesale numbers of kids falling through the cracks?
Right now, the chances are slim to none. The Ohio Department of Job and Family Services has given out this mandate. They have said this is coming. So, and that there's been no talk of it going away. So to answer your question, the deadline isn't going away, as we know right now.
Can I put you on the spot with a follow-up question?
Sure.
There are those of us who have lived in the political waters for a long time. You know, would it be a good thing or not a good thing this early on to start lobbying for a relaxation of that 2020 deadline?
And those conversations have occurred with other focus group that we have done this way, even at Franklin County Job and Family Services. Those things have been relayed from us back to the state of the challenges and the barriers family home child care providers are having, child care centers are having. We've even going through this media campaign, have gone through parent focus group, provider focus group that have talked about the star ratings and what that means and why they can't reach that goal, or we've talked about the lack of being able to pay have adequate pay for my employees. And so all of those things have been communicated with ODJFS. I encourage those conversations to continue to happen. We're definitely having those conversations at the county level, but we're also having the conversation as we're talking about the challenges and barriers, we're also having a conversation to say, well, what can we do together in order to combat those challenges and barriers? What can we do in order for providers to understand what it means simply for that provider to get from 1 to 2 to 3? We're having those conversations so in order for Action for Children to provide those services. So it's not going away. We have to do what we need to do in order to meet it.
We have a lot of educators in the room. I know Ron and her team, and probably almost everybody in the room, can identify with this. As a former state legislator, this reminds me a bit of the all the assessments that we've created in recent years. You know, 3rd grade assessments and 7th grade assessments and assessments all up and down the lines. It's great to have targets. It's great to have high aspirations and all that. But then when you notice that gap between where we're at and what those aspirations are with a hard and fast deadline, where does wisdom reside in terms of continuing that push with that scary looking deadline versus maybe having some flexibility with that deadline as we continue to push up the ladder.
And we've changed our conversation before with, okay, well, let's not think about the 5 right now. Let's think about the 3. Let's think about the 1 or the 2. And yeah, what I can say is I agree. We've been on those front lines, that we've had those real honest conversations in discussing those same exact situations and circumstances. And right now, it hasn't changed anything, but it doesn't negate having those conversations.
I have a technical question. I want to just make sure I understand. You're primarily using the term child care, and we're talking about more specifically preschool. Is there a difference there? Is it the same star rating? Are you asking child care providers to start having an educational component? Is that basically what's happening?
Right. So a part of currently, they are required to have some kind of curriculum. And once you become and get involved with the star rating system, then your foundational licensing requirement increases to a higher curriculum, degree teachers, classes, more classes that you have to take. So yes, and it's interesting because even with the Step Up to Quality parent focus group, even what you're saying, separating the child care and preschool mind, because even as a parent and a professional, it's not separated for me. When I go out to look at a child care facility or someone who's going to be caring for my child and teaching my child, I'm looking for that, preschool early education aspect. When we set in on our parent focus group, your parents out here in the community aren't thinking that way. They're not seeing a child care provider as an educator. They're not seeing a child care provider as my preschool teacher and getting my child ready for kindergarten. They're not seeing that early education right now is starting at birth. What they are asking for is a nurturer. They're asking for a safe environment, a place where their child is protected, and they're not seeing how that can be intertwined, how that can be all in one. And that was astounding to hear in that parent focus group, that as a parent, you're not thinking about going out for your infant to say, what does early childhood education look like for me? And I was shocked. And that's the reality of where we are. So when we're talking about child care and preschool, for us, it's not separate, it's the same. It's the same. And we want all of our child care providers, whether they're centers, homes, latchkey, to have that same mindset, that you are, even from birth, providing an educational environment.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Got one last question.
Sure.
How much is adequate funding, and how do we get there?
Oh, yeah, that is a really easy question. I don't think the question is adequate funding. I think the question is, what is the standard of quality? And how is quality consistently measured? That looks different for everyone. It varies depending on who you ask, and I think that's where the step up to quality comes in, by providing that baseline standard for quality while it reimburses what you're already receiving as a funding source. Now I'm going to reimburse you for the quality that you're providing. So I don't think there's a real answer for adequate funding.
We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let you off the hot seat now. Thank you very much,
thank
Tamika.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, jot down any thoughts, questions you have for later.
Or sooner, because we're getting ready to move right into, you've been patient and you've been drinking water through a fire hose all day with the enormous amount of information that we've been blessed and cursed with today. Blessed because there's so much great information here, cursed because it was a high learning curve for some of us in this room. Fortunately, for a lot of you, it's not, and we're relying on you. But we, from start to finish, we heard some very powerful research that shows very clearly that quality is life-changing, starting with those synapses in those infant brains. We've heard from people who are currently engaged in expanding pre-K. We've heard how other cities are doing it and how other cities, both in this state and across the country, are at this same work every day. We have seen what works. We've seen that successful programs are high quality, they are well-funded, they have educated teachers, they engage and educate parents early, and they keep it up. Not just when they're 4, but as early as possible and continuously. We know that we don't have enough quality early learning programs in the Hilltop. Fortunately, the mayor is committed to making a Hilltop an example for the rest of the city. As he said this morning, that is a tremendous commitment for us to take seriously and to build upon. We know that providers are not compensated enough to increase the quality of their programs, including providing education options for their teachers and paying them more. With that, hopefully you've been diligently cataloging your thoughts, maybe writing some thoughts and suggestions down. This is our opportunity to find out what resonates with you, what clangs with you, if anything. What have today's presentations, how have today's presentations influenced your thoughts and ideas on how we move forward? So it's open mic time, really, to kind of help us distill and formulate where we go from here.
Before we move to that, I've just a couple of things. We've mentioned that the next event in this process is a community meeting. It'll be right here on September 26th at 6 p.m. So I hope everybody can make that. And then after that, we'll move to the one-on-one conversations that you'll all be having with city staff. Before we go to our closing speaker, I just want to say, Mike, you asked a question, what resonated with you, and the thing that really hit me was when somebody said, we need to take what we're doing here in the Hilltop and this needs to lead the city. And I've lived on the Hilltop and worked on the Hilltop my entire life, and I was racking my brain. I can't think of a time when I feel like we've done that. And that just really excited me. If we can show the city how this is done, that would mean a lot. That would be awesome. Yeah. And changing the story of the Hilltop.
Thank you, John. We've spent a lot of time today talking about synapses working, not working, developing, and in the category of synapses not working, I've been calling Matt Max. I'm trying to improve my synapses as we go here, but they are getting better, because when I first met him, I was calling him John. So I'm making progress, Matt. Hold with me, and I'm going to continue working on my synapses until we conclude this whole process.
You're just trying to make me feel better.
And speaking of synapses, we have a special guest who's going to thank you for all of your hard work and close us out and talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish here. And she comes here in many roles. One is she's working every day with her own infant on developing synapses, and so she has a special personal interest in making sure all children in this community have what her child is getting every day. She is Elizabeth Brown. She is a member of Columbus City Council, as you know, and she chairs the Education Committee. She has much experience not only in education, but in economic development, nonprofit service, and state government. She previously served as Economic Development Manager for the City of Columbus and has worked with middle school students to improve literacy as a City Year AmeriCorps member. She's been published in New York Magazine and National Public Radio affiliate WOSU. She's on the board of the Center for Balanced Living, a mental health treatment center that specializes in eating disorders. She and her husband, Patrick Katzenmeyer, live in Columbus's Victorian Village neighborhood, and as I mentioned, been blessed with recently born daughter, Carolyn, who's developing very quickly. And Elizabeth, we are blessed to have you with us. We look forward to your closing remarks.
Thank you so much. I actually wanted to bring my daughter today. She's almost 2. She'll be 2 next month, and she still takes a noon nap. So she wasn't ready and with it and awake to be able to come with me today. But thank you so much for having me. And I love seeing some familiar faces in the crowd and some new ones. And I'm just so impressed by your dedication to be here today, all day, and to show up over and over again. This is about investing in not just our community here in the Hilltop, but really the future of the city. The work you're doing here is all about making a stronger city years down the road. I do chair the Education Committee. I also chair the Economic Development Committee. And I really think of the work that we do to enrich children's pre-K experiences and to expand access to pre-K experience as an economic development investment. It's good for kids, but it's good for all of us in the future. The dollars that we invest in a high-quality pre-K education today mean somebody who is that much more prepared to enter our workforce 15 and 20 years down the line. So this is critical, and it's actually truly one of the most urgent things I think we work on as a city. So I want to assure you that your city is behind you. My other council members, my colleagues, our mayor are really dedicated to this work, as you know. And since 2014, the city has served through our dollars, through our grant programs, 2,000 kids. We look forward to serving another 1,000, is that right, in the coming year, which is pretty incredible. It's really it's kind of the same dollars that we've gotten, I think, better and more efficient at using because of Rhonda Johnson and Matt Smido's really good work and the rest of our education department to make sure these dollars count for the providers. So I'm excited about what's ahead of us. And again, just to emphasize the importance, one of the things that I think about is a report that was handed to you all, I think earlier today, from the Brookings Institute about preparedness for kindergarten, and that just 48% of lower income kids are prepared when they enter kindergarten. Compare that to 75% in middle and higher income households. 75% of kids are prepared. So this is the sort of the earliest achievement gap that we're seeing. And you know, as parents, as community members, as providers, we can work on this all together. I don't know your name, but I really liked your comment. What's your name? Lillian. I really liked your comment, Lillian, about how we need to get the message out to parents, because that's a huge part of it. I mean, I live that experience as a parent myself, and I'm really only as good as the education I'm receiving as a parent, to read to my daughter, to point things out when we walk along the street, to help complement, the world around her that she's kind of building, these building blocks in her brain, these synapses every day. So anyway, I want for my kid what I want for all kids in Columbus, and I know you do too, and I thank you for your commitment to that and your commitment to working with us as a city, again, to bolster us for decades to come. So thanks again.
We are adjourned. Thank you so much for your hard work.